Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Cindy stood still for a few seconds as she approached the HR department, adjusted the collar of her blouse while stroking her hair, looked at her reflection in the mounted glass. Her own face seemed pathetic and frightened. An ordinary schoolgirl, not a clerk with solid experience. Yes, she was probably a schoolgirl. At least in her heart, she was standing in front of the door now, trembling as if she had come to see the head teacher. Why was she always so afraid of it? She herself had always been an excellent student. Helen, the bookkeeper, jumped out of the office, almost knocking Cindy off her feet. She looked at her and gave her an enthusiastic go for it. "I'm so sorry, please, I didn't hit you." No, it's okay," Cindy assured her. She survived by a miracle. On some unknown reflex, she managed to sidestep it. The only thing Cindy fell short of was the title of a true type honor student. There was the attitude toward physical education. Usually those who are good at math and other subjects where you have to work with your head show terrible results in the gym, can't do exercises, climb rope, and sports games with a ball cause them real horror. Cindy, on the other hand, had a tolerable attitude to training. She didn't shine, but she wasn't a dog. At least she wasn't ridiculed for it at school. Or should I say not ridiculed for that at least? There were enough other reasons to be afraid and lower her gaze in front of her classmates. "Are you going to the girls or to yourself?" Helen asked, nodding meaningfully at the sign hanging by the door. The sign said Sophia, the head of the Human Resources Department. Cindy answered herself. Then she came to her senses and shook her head panic-stricken. "That's not what I meant to say, Sophia. I get it," nodded Helen. Something akin to pity flashed in her gaze. Cindy lowered her gaze. She knew her coworkers weren't ridiculing her, maybe whispering behind her back. How could they not? But not maliciously, more like sympathetically, pitying some loser. Although the girl didn't understand exactly what she was unlucky about. She had a normal job, a loving husband, and some kind of housing. Albeit rented, but quite a decent apartment almost in the center of the city. There were a lot of people in her life who were much more unlucky. Why did everyone feel sorry for her? Why would Sophia be wary of Helen? Just a case, but you're not quitting. Are you coming? No. The concern in the accountant's voice made Cindy feel warm. The girls, though they pitied her, sincerely disliked her as a little sister who had to be looked after and who might be lost without their care. Cindy forced herself to smile and shook her head. "I'm not going to quit yet." "You're what?" "Just had a question about the vacation. I thought I'd check it out, so check with the girls. Will they help you?" Helen suggested, but having realized, apparently by the expression on the girl's face, that the matter is quite different, she waved her hand. "Okay, whatever you want." Sophia seems to be in her room right now. At least while I was sitting with the girls, she didn't go anywhere. And I have to get to accounting before they put out an APB on me. Good luck. "Thank you," Cindy muttered, looking at her. Helen walked down the corridor with determination and speed. An irredeemable optimist who could not be thrown off her guard by any unexpected event. Cindy wanted very much to be like that, but how could she learn? And where none of the textbooks she had read in her school days had anything on the subject, not a single useful fact at all. That's why bigwigs do better in life. Courage more than supersedes any science. Cindy sighed and entered the study. It was the so-called anteroom, where the regular staff, the so-called entourage Sophia, Wendy, Betty, and Vanessa were sitting. The girls raised their heads and looked at their guest. Cindy, without waiting for questions, said hello and asked Sophia. Vanessa responded as usual. Where else would she be? The question was purely rhetorical. Everyone knew that the head of the personnel department loved her job like no one else married to her position. As some joked, Sophia did not even like to go on vacation. She put the matter off until the last minute, until Director William himself reminded the woman that by law she was obliged to take a vacation. And even after leaving the walls of her office, Sophia stayed here, even mentally, calling her subordinates several times a day and asking how things were going. "We're all under Sophia's thumb," Betty joked. It sounded a little creepy. Maybe that's why Cindy was so afraid to go on the carpet. "When am I coming in?" she asked timidly. "Birch the doorknob." "Go ahead," nodded Wendy. "Sophia loves you. You don't even have to report to her who came and will be so happy." Love is a stretch, of course. But Cindy understood what she was talking about. None of the girls knew what it was about, and Cindy was well aware of it. Sophia had been rather indifferent to her at first. At the first meeting, he read her resume for a good couple of minutes, raising his eyebrows skeptically. "No work experience." Finally, she asked, as if it wasn't obvious enough. All Cindy could boast of was a red diploma in economics and business administration, a few research papers, and winning student competitions. Not much. Temporary jobs, barmaid and flyer boy didn't count. They obviously couldn't impress a respectable lady. On the other hand, Cindy was only 22. It would be surprising if she had a solid record at that age. "I've never worked as a clerk," Cindy admitted, "but I'm willing to give it a try. I'm sure I can do it." She blushed and sat up under the scrutiny. Sophia. She didn't know where to go. The only time Cindy felt this uncomfortable was at school, when she had to go to the blackboard. And despite her good studies, she had an inordinate shyness. And it was her looks that were to blame. Back in the day, her classmates had given Cindy a good rundown of what was wrong with her. Lips too thin, nose too thin. Big height is not insignificant either. The girl was one of the tallest in the class, and because of that, she was a constant embarrassment. Cindy was sure Sophia had noted all these flaws as well. There wasn't even a doubt that this job wasn't going to work out for her. It was possible to get up and leave. The only thing holding Cindy back was embarrassment. It wasn't proper to run away. Not without saying goodbye. Sophia delved into her resume again and made an unintelligible noise. "Am I allowed to leave?" asked Cindy timidly. The head of HR looked at her in surprise. "Where?" "Well, out of your office. You're not satisfied with my candidacy, are you?" "Are you?" Partly the girl wished she was. The stern women sitting across from her she was afraid of. Sophia did not bother to answer her question. Read the resume one more time, as if there was more to read, and asked, "Are you well versed?" Cindy answered perfectly, and immediately regretted it. It sounded too arrogant, like she was going to brag. "The salary is not very high. Are you satisfied?" Sophia continued her interrogation. Not that Cindy was thrilled with the amount of money in the ad, but she had no choice. As they say, better a bird in the hand than a crane in the sky, so she nodded. "Do you have any questions or suggestions?" Cindy didn't have any questions, except the eternal one. You can howl, which school children often use, but which she personally had never used in all her 11 years at school. "Good, then I won't keep you," Sophia said. "We will consider other applicants, and if we decide on yours, we will call you back." "I understand, goodbye." Cindy was in such a hurry to escape from the office that she almost fell down. Behind her another brooding sounded. Us. The girl was sure that no call would wait. I'm sure the harsh recruiters tossed the stupid resume in the trash right after she left, and rightly so. She'll find someone with more experience. What was Cindy's surprise when about a week later she got a call from one of the girls. She couldn't remember who it was, inviting her to work. Probably no one else would accept such a salary, Cindy thought, but she was not particularly upset. After all, it was all to her advantage. She had worked at the company for 2 years and had hardly ever encountered Sophia. She met her occasionally in the corridors and greeted her politely a couple of times a month. And that was all. Their communication was limited to that. Everything changed one day when the head of the personnel department caught Cindy in tears. The girl was crying alone in the restroom and did not hear footsteps. Sophia's voice suddenly sounded behind her back, making the girl jump up. "What are you doing here?" "Cindy?" she asked, as if it wasn't already obvious. Before turning around, Cindy furiously wiped her face with a handkerchief. It only made it worse. Her cheeks, already resembling the color of a tomato, began to burn. "I'm sorry, I'm leaving now." The girl mumbled and tried to slip out the door, but Sophia grabbed her arm. "I didn't say you were interrupting me," said the personnel officer. "I was just asking what's wrong." Her voice sounded sudden, soft, and much more human than usual. Cindy thought for a moment that she had made a mistake and was talking to someone other than the supervisor. But no such straight spirits and meshkov. That sweater was not in the cards for anyone else at the company. It was undoubtedly Sophia herself. Ignore it, Cindy said. It's personal. And it's my job to look into the personnel files of employees. So please don't argue, Cindy. It's the way she calls me by my first name that's so unusual. Coming from the mouth of a stern personnel officer knocked the girl out of her element. She felt like she was going to burst into tears. Sophia glanced at the wristwatch that adorned her wrist and nodded contentedly. We'll have time to sit in the cafe across the street for half an hour before lunch is over, especially since I suspect you haven't had lunch. The personnel officer was right. What's lunch? Cindy had no appetite at all. Nor does she have one now. All the more so at the thought of going to the cafe. She was horrified to go to the cafe in such a state. She asked, looking at herself in the mirror. Looking at her own face with puffy eyes and red spots on her cheeks caused Cindy disgust. A real scarecrow like that no face control would let her over the threshold. Sophia grinned awkwardly. My girl, did you even see what kind of contingent goes there? You've been in that cafe at least once. Cindy shook her head in embarrassment. Sophia sighed. It's all right with you. Okay, wait for me outside the door and we'll leave in a few minutes. Or better yet, go wash up while she does. I assure you it won't hurt. I don't think it did any good. But Cindy did as she was told out of habit, because it was an order from her superiors. Sophia, who had returned, was in her late 50s, despite her age. She looked like a beauty queen next to her. At least, that's what Cindy seemed to think. They walked down the corridor in silence. They met Helen on the way, but she looked at them with surprised eyes and said nothing. It was hard to imagine a stranger couple. And Cindy wondered what had gotten into her boss and wanted to find out more about her, or actually sympathizing with her. The latter was hard to believe. They walked through and Sophia, whether out of sympathy for her or on a whim, chose a table in the corner. What do you want to order? What is there? Sophia looked around and said conspiratorially, lowering her voice. Actually, this is not a cafe, but rather a hot dog. It's just the name that's respectable. But there's a couple or three salads here, an Olivier or a vinaigrette or something. What's your choice? I'd have a hot dog, I guess, said Cindy. No, probably not. 2. Hot dog. Sophia objected and suddenly winked at her. Cindy thought she was dreaming it all when the other day she acted strangely. And that's putting it mildly, like she was a girlfriend instead of a boss. What was behind this at the hot dog? They got coffee from the machine. Cindy ventured to say, I didn't think you ate such a thing, and I couldn't even imagine it. That you even go to places like this. Yes, where should I go? Sophia asked about restaurants. I don't know. You're so respectable. You should be in high society. That's funny, Sophia. What kind of society do you think it is here? She asked. Cindy looked around. At one of the tables were workers. At another, a flower girl who had taken off from her work on the street. From a stall nearby. The furniture here, too, did not shine with novelty, and from the ceiling fresh from the fly tape. The girl couldn't find anything to answer. And Sophia grinned at Cindy again. I'm from a working family myself, she said. Whatever you think of me, I wasn't born with a golden spoon in my mouth. My whole childhood was spent in the countryside among the cows of the houses, to sidekicks and unemployed alcoholics. Then I lived in a student hostel. These people are just like me, just a little less fortunate. And that's another way of looking at it. Cindy looked at her incredulously. Really? She asked. I always thought you were from a family of professors or engineers. Often things are not what they seem, Sophia said admonishingly. This also applies to people. Remember, please. It might come in handy someday, when the river looked like water. In a few months, Cindy would remember these words, which turned out to be prophetic. For now, she just drank her coffee and waited to see what would happen next. Why were you crying? Sophia asked. Is someone in the department hurting you? No. Cindy was indignant at that question. Everything is fine in our department. And we're not kids anymore to bully each other. Maybe not kids, but you're talking like a little girl. The personnel officer shook her head. If you don't know that adults can poison more often than children, then what's the matter? What's all the fuss about? The girl looked at her and made up her mind. After all, who better to know about the job than the head of HR? My husband had been fired, she admitted. Kevin had called and informed him before lunch. That was it. That's your excuse for crying. Sophia was surprised. Why, isn't that enough? Cindy, you know, people have much bigger problems than your husband. Sick children, the death of someone close to them, divorce. Sophia, this isn't the first time he's lost his job. This is the 7th time, or I don't even know how many. Cindy didn't know how she got that out of her mouth. The girl's cup of patience must have been overflowing, for her secret had come out. I'm sorry, she said, lowering her gaze to her plate. I didn't mean to speak so harshly, it just came out. Sophia didn't react in any way to her outburst. At the first mention of work, there was a professional interest in her eyes. And what was your husband's job, if it's not a secret? She asked. In what enterprises? Cindy was embarrassed. It was not even a stretch to call the places Kevin had worked in businesses. First, when we first met, he was a bartender at a restaurant, she said. Then, when Kevin was laid off, he worked for a while as a longshoreman at a furniture store. He got a good paycheck, but he tore his back out and left that job and took a job as a sales consultant. He got kicked out for being rude. Then he was an antenna installer, and that was it. That's enough. Sophia stopped her. Can you not go on? Just tell me what your last job was and we'll stop there. Kevin worked at a call center. He was fired for making mistakes when he was chatting. The bosses didn't like it. Yes, a complicated story, Sophia admitted, looking at her carefully. Do you mostly live on your salary? Did I get that right? The girl remained silent, and that was the best answer. The personnel officer asked bluntly, why don't you leave him? Sophia, how can it be? Do we love each other? It's obvious. He's sitting on his wife's neck. Oh, wait, you're running away. Sophia grabbed Cindy's hand. Can I do something to help? What's there to help? Kevin is left to search job sites again. Although I doubt there are any people left in our town who don't know him, Cindy sighed. You'd be surprised, but this is the first time I've heard of your husband. Well, what good is it if there's a suitable vacancy in our enterprise? I'll let you know first. Sophia, really? Yeah, and I hope I don't regret it. Mind you, I'm doing this for you. I don't care about your Kevin. Sophia, thank you, Cindy. I was ready to burst into tears again, but this time with joy. The personnel officer waved his hand. Wait to thank me. I haven't done anything yet, and I'm not even promising anything. Maybe your Kevin will find a job on his own before something becomes available. Who knows? I don't think so, the girl thought. But she didn't say it out loud, just crossed her fingers for good luck, for Sophia's prediction to come true. And now, many weeks later, the personnel officer called her in to talk to her. Cindy walked to her office and worried. Could it be that they were really lucky? Or did Sophia want to talk about some nonsense like a vacation extension or timesheets? Hello, you called. The girl looked into the office and smiled against her will, suddenly feeling that everything would be fine. Yes, Cindy, come in, sit down. Sophia put the papers aside and looked straight at her. How are things going at work? I'm fine. Or did you mean? Yes, Cindy, I mean your husband. How's he doing? Has Kevin found a job, or is he still looking? Do you even remember his name? How could I not? So does he want the job or not? Does he? Of course he does. To nodding. Cindy, what did you find for him? A courier job opening up, said the woman. Gotta deliver papers, pick up mail, that sort of thing. I think it's pretty hard to screw up here, then the husband can handle it. The girl blushed, remembering how she had described Kevin last time. As if he were some kind of a slacker who messed up everything and couldn't do anything useful. Of course he will, she said. You don't know how smart and clever Kevin is. When he was a student, he played what? Where? When? And his team often won. And then the girl realized she was talking nonsense and stopped talking. Sophia nodded politely. I have no doubt that your husband will do quite well and last longer than in his previous jobs. There are bound to be mistakes, and Kevin has something to teach you. That's right. Cindy tried to detect sarcasm in the friend's voice, but there didn't seem to be any. Then I'll tell Kevin to come to you on Monday. The girl clarified. Thank you, Sophia. I don't know what we would have done without you. Petrovic waved her hand and went on her way. I hope I'm not repenting for getting involved in this whole thing. Cindy felt she couldn't sit still any longer. No documents or letters could keep her at work that day. The girl asked to leave early and hurried home, but first to the market. Kevin's future employment was to be celebrated, which meant Cindy was going to cook dinners. Money in their family was very tight, so the couple rarely indulged in meat dishes. Now Cindy thought she could afford it. After all, Kevin would get his paycheck in just a month. Cindy went to the market for meat. Following an old rule, she had learned with her mother's milk that they sold the freshest and tastiest products there. However, sometimes in her head the girl thought that in fact, the reason was quite different. The obese saleswoman welcomed Cindy with words of beauty. No one else had ever called a girl that in her life. Hello, Cindy nodded politely. I'd like half a kilogram of minced chicken, please. No matter how happy she was to find a job for her husband, she shouldn't be so lavish. That's why she took so little and chicken mince instead of beef. Deep down, Cindy felt that their luck would not last long. Kevin was unlikely to last more than 2 months in the new place. However, she didn't want to think about the worst. After buying meat, some fruit, and a small bottle of champagne, Cindy went home. It was a hard walk with bags. The girl must have looked ridiculous, but she didn't care. A smile was on Cindy's lips. She was about to make her husband happy. How happy Kevin would be at this good fortune. She realized that something was wrong when she entered the apartment. There was a scent of vanilla in the hallway. Perhaps it was also in the stairwell, but Cindy didn't notice anything, preoccupied with her own thoughts. Then the girl noticed a woman's shoes standing on the floor. For shoes, the pattern was vaguely familiar to her. At one time, a friend of Cindy's had perked up all her ears telling her how much she wanted such shoes. Molly had a real fixation. After she saw similar shoes on the feet of a movie star, and hereby all rights and wrongs friend achieved her. She bought the shoes from abroad, spending almost half of her salary on them. When Molly longed for something, she would stop at nothing until she got what she wanted. And so it was this time. Molly came in. Perplexed, Cindy developed and moved her shoes next to her friend's. Why would that be? The thought flashed through her mind that Kevin and Molly had decided to arrange a present for her birthday, which was due in a couple of weeks. Maybe planning some kind of event, a celebration at a coffee shop. A special gift was hard to believe because nothing like this had ever happened in Cindy's life before. Usually Kevin managed with a bouquet of asters, bought from old ladies, selling at the bus stop, or a box of candy. And yet there was still a little girl in Cindy's soul. She wanted so much to hope for a miracle. The girl put the bag on the floor and went to her room. Cindy heard some conversations and laughter, and her heart started to beat excitedly. It wasn't like discussing a gift at all. It was more like it. Cindy opened the door to the room and froze on the threshold. The picture that opened to her was more than shocking. She would rather die than see it. Kevin and Molly were kissing on the couch. Her friend was half-dressed, her golden curls. Her hair was in a perfect mess. Apparently, the kissing hadn't just started with Cindy. It was still lucky that she hadn't been delayed at the market. Otherwise, the girl might have witnessed something more and would have died on the spot. "What are you doing here? Are your lips dry?" asked Cindy. As she always did in moments of shock, she started talking nonsense. Molly turned around and giggled embarrassedly. "Oh, it's you." "Hi," she said and rested her forehead on Kevin's shoulder, shaking herself with laughter. Cindy shifted her gaze to her husband's face, waiting. She herself did not know what remorse, embarrassment, some kind of explanation for everything that was happening. The girl naively believed that it could be explained somehow. Kevin could say that everything happened by accident, that Molly herself had jumped on him, came here for the first and last time. Instead, Kevin smirked, "Something new. The paperwork's out early today, or something." His gaze was somehow Solovyev's. Cindy immediately realized that her husband had been drinking. "Are you with her?" The girl wanted to call her friend by name, but suddenly realized that she could not do it. Why? Why not? Let me think about it. Kevin showed a deep thought on his face. Probably because your friend is better than you, isn't she? Cindy's lips quivered. She had no doubt that Molly was better, more beautiful, more relaxed, fun, but no one had ever compared them to anyone, much less Kevin. The girl turned and ran out of the apartment. Staying here any longer she simply couldn't. For as long as Cindy could remember, she had always solved her problems just by running away. In her early childhood, when her parents started fighting, she would run out into the yard and sit there until it was dark, until the screaming from the open window stopped. At school, she would run away from class. When boys began to ridicule her for her long nose or called her popular, she never took advantage. And maybe it was her mother Kate's fault. The one who had burned herself once in a relationship and divorced her husband when Cindy was 5. Scolded every male member of the species in front of her. It was a mistake to get involved with them. Mumbled. Whenever there was a show on TV or a neighbor told her a hot story. Men are no good. Such speeches had their effect. Cindy was afraid of boys, noisy, restless. They gave her a defenseless fear. Play with the girls, her mother added. Cindy didn't try to join the boys, though. Some girls from the yard sometimes played war games with the boys, but not her. Although, sometimes, watching your friends, the girl felt a feeling similar to envy. Aunt Anna added oil to the fire, who came to them a couple of times a month for tea. Her personal life was not successful, just like her sister's. The woman had been divorced for many years and, according to her, had forgotten what it was like to be married. As a rule, tea was followed by a glass of wine, and then Mother and Aunt Anna began to complain to each other about their fate. A plumber from our housing and utilities department is clinging to me, my aunt said, immediately holding out the wine. Drinker, Kate asked laconically. No, he's not. Why is he alone if he's so good? How old is he? Aunt Anna shrugged. I don't know, 40 or so. At that age, you can't get any normal men. Her sister was categorical, and they're usually married. This one was married too, divorced a month ago. That makes sense, Kate nodded. Looking for a place to live. He wants to get under your wing. That's nothing new. Later, as Cindy grew up, it seemed to her that her mother took a kind of perverse pleasure in looking for faults in others. Still, she was surprised at the phrase about normal men. It turned out that they did exist. Not extinct like they used to be, Kate assured herself. Those around her must have sensed her unreported fear. No way. There was no other way to explain the fact that her classmates at school had started picking on her specifically. Pulling her pigtails, laughing, hiding her notebooks. Cindy patiently endured it all and did not even try to fight. Her desk mate Betty was surprised by such behavior. Give them back, she said. Why do you put up with it? How am I supposed to fight back? Cindy asked timidly. There are many of them, and they are strong. And I and you will be strong. Look, Betty got up from her seat, walked over to the bully who had teased Cindy not 5 minutes ago and slapped him on the back. See, very nice, shouted the bully. For what? For everything nice, the girl replied and turned back to Cindy. And you do the same. I could never do that, whispered Cindy, glancing furtively around. He continued to swear, but didn't even make an attempt to approach Betty and get back at her. Maybe her friend was right. That's how you should treat boys so they'll leave you alone. Betty looked at her with a strange expression of either pity or contempt. Cindy had seen similar looks more than once. In the years that followed, many people looked at her in the same way. Fool, you'll have to put up with it, Betty said, leaning over her textbook. From the tone in which it was said, Cindy realized that they were not going to make friends. Apparently, the contempt her roommate felt for her overpowered her pity. However, it cannot be said that all the boys treated her badly. In the 8th grade, one of them, Nick, who was a 3rd grader, suddenly showed interest in her. Elena did not even immediately realize what was happening. It began on February 14, Valentine's Day. The girl has always had contradictory feelings. Hope in her soul fought with despair, ostentatious indifference, which she kept on her face. On this holiday, with great difficulty hid envy, despite all the lectures of her mother that from boys only trouble. Cindy wished someone would give her a card, even if it was just a friendly one. Who was she lying to? The girl wanted not just to feel a piece of cardboard in her hands, but to hear a declaration of love, a reassurance that she was of value to someone. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Cindy was completely downhearted and no longer expected anything when brightly painted classmate Nastya, who worked this year Cupid on the 8th, placed a pink heart in front of her. Bet he could pass it on, Cindy asked, squinted the empty seats of her desk neighbor. Is that for me? Cindy thought she had misheard. Nastya looked at her like she was retarded and confirmed. Well, yes. The classmate withdrew, and Cindy gingerly looked at the card. It was scary to take it in her hands. Despite Nastya's assurances, the girl didn't believe it was really for her. There had been some kind of mistake. It couldn't be. Or had someone decided to play a joke on her? Now Cindy would turn the cardboard over and read on the backside some joke or jokes about her appearance. Cindy wasn't exactly expecting compliments. The bell rang, and Betty returned to the classroom. She was holding a pile of cards like the ones Cindy had been given. The girl glowed with happiness, and Cindy hid her Valentine in her textbook. Was the gift bad or good? She didn't want anyone else to know about it. The hidden card. The whole class stirred her thoughts and made it hard for her to concentrate on her studies. It wasn't until Betty was called to the blackboard that Cindy decided to see what was written on the Valentines. Holding her breath, she flipped it over. Love you, your prince. The inscription was so short, Cindy was taken aback. You couldn't make it out, even whether the man had written those words sincerely or meant to laugh, and there was no signature. It seemed to her that the scrawled handwriting was familiar to her, but Cindy couldn't say for sure who it belonged to. She turned around, but there was not a single interested look in her eyes. Everyone was looking the other way. Some were looking at the textbook, some were looking at the blackboard, and some were counting Valentines and reporting their number to their desk mate. Maybe the handwriting only seemed familiar to her, or maybe the person who had sent the Valentine was in a different class. That thought kept her on her toes the whole class, and the next one too. Your prince? No, she was definitely being made fun of. No guy would call himself that. It's beneath their dignity. But what if there should be at least one romantic in their school? Cindy went home to the place where her mother was waiting for her with more maxims about men being assholes and useful life advice. The mood had gone completely downhill. She didn't want to think about Valentine's Day or her mother. And Cindy, by an effort of will, turned her thoughts to math. She had to study hard to achieve something in life one day. But stop. I think those words were her mother's too. What are you doing? It's barely crawling. We have to run. Nick appeared so suddenly beside her that Cindy staggered to the side and asked uncertainly where to run to. Nowhere. Where from? School. It's Friday. School's out. You're not in a hurry. Are you? Studying? Do you like it? There's no hurry. My folks are in trouble. Cindy shook her head in fear. No, really? My mom and I are fine. We're having a normal conversation and relax. Nick waved his hand. I was just kidding. So I know you and your parents are fine. Why would I scold you? You're as straight a student. A chill ran down Cindy's spine at those words. The word excellent from his lips did not sound like a compliment. It sounded the same to the other classmates, though. To be an excellent student in their school was not an honor. And yet, what suddenly needed Nick in the school walls? They never socialized, even saying hello once in a while. Of course, it was better than the endless taunts she was subjected to by the other boys, but Nick didn't dignify her with attention either. Such unexpected friendliness made Cindy wary. She grabbed the strap of her purse tighter in case Nick suddenly yanked on it and rushed away and quickened her pace. Nick kept up. That's what I'm talking about. That's how you run away from school, he said approvingly. What are you doing tonight? Studying. And tomorrow, Nick, what do you need? Cindy asked. Tell me straight, because I don't understand. God only knew how hard it was for her to memorize that phrase. And Cindy. It was the longest phrase she'd uttered addressing a guy in months. Did you like the card? Nick asked. What was Cindy tripping over herself? That was the kind of question she hadn't expected. What card? But didn't I give you a Valentine's card? Did I? She admitted it. What was it from you? Of course, I'd ask if it was from someone else. Did you like the card or not? Cindy nodded timidly. Definitely a prank, she thought. But Nick didn't look like Prince Charming at all, more like a pea-brained jester who could laugh at anything he chose. Nick bragged. I turned the whole stationery department upside down until I found this one. Especially for you. Why? Cindy asked. What a question. What do you think Valentines are for? Do I like you? That's all there is to it. Cindy was dizzy with everything that was going on. She was walking home with Nick. Nick had confessed his love to her. It was like a dream. But she couldn't tell if it was a good one or a bad one. The girl was totally confused. So I'll see you off every day from now on, Nick concluded. A guy has to protect the girl he likes. Right? Protect her from who? Cindy wanted to ask, but of course she didn't. At that moment, her face was burning with embarrassment. She wanted someone to protect her from Nick himself. She needed time to gather her thoughts, to realize what was even going on. Fortunately, Nick didn't walk her all the way to her apartment, staying near the entrance. Cindy flew up to the second floor with unprecedented speed. She prayed for one thing, that her mother wouldn't see her through the window to see her off. Kate worked a shift at the grocery store, and this day was her day off. Barely entering the apartment, Cindy heard the sounds of cooking coming from the kitchen. Something was grumbling, a knife clattering on the board. Back, shouted Kate. Then quickly change clothes and go help. Cindy took off her coat, sent it on the hanger, and dropped it on her fingers, trying to quiet the shivering. It was no use. It made sense if the shivering was caused by the cold. But now the causes were quite different. The girl was getting too excited. She checked the Valentine, made sure it was safely tucked away in her algebra textbook, and staggered into the kitchen. Books her mother will not search. Now the important thing was to act normal. What are you cooking? Cindy asked, approaching the table. Soup? That's good. We haven't made it in a while. A total failure. The girl realized it before she could finish the sentence. Cindy said it as mechanically as if she were repeating something she had memorized by heart. Even Kate, who very rarely has intimate conversations with her daughter, picked up on something wrong. What's wrong? She asked. Are you acting weird? Nothing, said Cindy. I'm fine, but I can tell you're not. Someone's hurt you. Cindy almost laughed at the suggestion, for when she was really hurt by someone, her mother never noticed anything. But now that it was the other way around, she was alert as a bloodhound. Or was it because there was a boy involved? Had Kate spent so much time on the subject that she could sense where men were involved from a mile away? Cindy never complained to her mother about her classmates. It was embarrassing to be called a bunch of names. It was like calling yourself a loser. Let her mother rather think everything was fine. Neither Cindy's height nor her nose could be changed, so Kate's intervention wouldn't have made a difference. No one hurt me, Cindy said. You imagined it. So why are you so down in the dumps? I didn't do well in physics. I couldn't solve the equation, said the girl. The tension was gone from her gaze. Kate, she seemed to believe in the physicist. That would be something to be upset about. You're not going to go into engineering as a pure humanities major, but you're not going to get a B in engineering. I'm asking you. You don't have to worry about it. That was the end of the subject. The girl realized that her mother wouldn't ask her anything else. Cindy took a knife in her hands and started peeling potatoes. Though her thoughts were far away, she remembered what had happened on the street and tried to understand whether Nick was telling the truth or lying to her. The answer never occurred to her. In such matters, the girl was as naive as a baby. The next morning, Nick waited for her on the way to school. He waved and shouted hello so loudly that a younger classmate walking nearby fumbled to the side. Cindy smiled shyly back. She still didn't know how to respond to Nick's advances. You're late today, Nick noticed. You're usually early. I overslept, the girl confessed embarrassedly. It was the first time in her life she hadn't heard the alarm clock. It was true. Cindy was so excited about what had happened that she couldn't fall asleep at 0 o'clock, fidgeting from side to side. But by morning, she was looking tired. If anyone would be responsible for her poor grades, it would be Nick. There's a reason adults tend to shut teenagers out of love. If you tell it in class, no one will believe it. You should have been late and showed up after the bell rang. Why? I don't get it. Because you always sit in the corner and no one notices you. They'd notice you right away. It'd be like being on stage, you know. At the mere mention of the stage, Cindy felt a sticky fear. Maybe Nick was right, and she was coming to school so early, on purpose, so as not to draw attention to herself. The thought struck her with its plausibility. It had never occurred to the girl before that she was doing this, or that to avoid other people. Nick must have realized from the look on her face that the topic raised didn't excite Cindy, because he turned the conversation to another. "This is for you," he said, holding out a small box to the girl. "What is it?" Cindy lifted the lid and looked inside. What a beauty! The box contained a small jewelry box with a picture on the lid. Hidden in it was a little ring, if Cindy had one. But that wasn't what was important. It wasn't the gift that mattered, it was the attention. Cindy remembered a phrase that had seemed to her the height of banality. The folk wisdom turned out to be true, looking at a small box, in fact, completely unnecessary thing. The girl experienced a crazy happiness. "What are you, Nick?" Did not stand muttered she. "What is it for?" "What do you mean? What for?" "I gave you nothing but a Valentine's gift. Flowers are expensive now, and they'll freeze outside. I found something to replace them." Cindy wanted to argue that a jewelry box isn't cheap either, but she didn't. It would have looked like she wasn't happy about the gift and wanted to hurt Nick. Instead, she smiled and said, "Thank you, Nick. I really liked your present." Nick mumbled something and turned away. The girl thought he was smiling too. They arrived at the school, deposited their clothes in the check room. It took Cindy seconds. Nick fiddled with his shoelaces for ages. "Don't wait for me," he muttered, not lifting his head. "Go to class. I'll be right there." "I'm in no hurry," Cindy replied, though she herself was almost jumping up and down with impatience. The large round clock hanging on the wall showed without 1 minute. 8. To be late and end up on stage, just as Nick had predicted. The girl didn't want to be at all. Nick sighed and started and looked at her. "Cindy, did you misunderstand? I want you and me to come to class separately." "Why?" Nick waved his hand vaguely to keep the people from talking. "What people? All in your voice?" Cindy asked. "Well, you know the boys. If they see us together, they'll start making jokes. We'll meet without anyone seeing us." "Deal." Cindy nodded. It all sounded logical, but she felt sick to her stomach. It seemed like she should be glad that Nick wasn't mocking her, that he wasn't making fun of her in front of her classmates. And yet Cindy wasn't. She wasn't being mocked, but it was impossible to call their story a love story. It was just a misunderstanding, like the rest of Cindy's life. "Okay," she nodded. "I understand." Nick smiled back at her words as if relieved. "And not telling anyone about us, Cindy." "Okay." The girl nodded again. It made her feel a little better that Nick had called her Polly. Usually everyone, even her mother, preferred to use the full name Cindy. It sounded pretty, but it was kind of formal or something. Holly was almost like music. Cindy walked into the classroom, carefully pretending that everything was normal, as it always was. No one cared about her, though. No one even paid attention to her appearance. But when Nick came a couple of minutes later, the class exploded with shouts and noise. Nick had a certain popularity, though he wasn't exactly a star. Cindy was once again surprised that he had been paying attention to her all day. Nick was sticking to his plan, not talking to Cindy or even looking at her. In short, he was behaving as usual. But the girl must have been acting a little strange because she noticed Betty. "Why were you always fidgeting?" Her desk mate asked her. "Are you not feeling well?" "No, I'm fine." "Then maybe you're worried about something." Cindy, who usually worries because she's nothing to others, is attached to her. Irritated. "Yeah, I'm a little worried about biology. Wasn't there a quiz on that?" Cindy nodded, glancing furtively at Nick. "A test. Oh my God." "I didn't study for anything," Betty replied, without a trace of panic in her voice, and stared at the phone again. By the end of the day, Cindy had completely collapsed, thinking that everything that had happened the day before was just a dream. At some point, she almost burst into tears in the middle of the lesson. She wanted to jump up, run to the trash can and throw the stupid box there. Or better yet, throw it at the head of Nick, who was giggling quietly with his friends and had forgotten it even existed. Contrary to the usual, this day the girl ran away from the class, almost first waited for the bell from the last lesson, and threw her textbooks in her bag. Even near the check room, she did not stay long. She put on her coat and hat and rushed to the door. She threw the casket into the trash can near the school, wanted to send the Valentine to the same place, but couldn't find it at once and decided to postpone it for later. Maybe it's for the best. How happy would she be to tear this unnecessary piece of cardboard to shreds? Right now, the school just didn't have time for that. Did she really not need the card that much, though? Cindy clutched it so tightly in her fist that she cheated on everything. Cindy, freeze for a moment scattered somewhere. The girl heard Nick's voice behind her and quickened her step, which, however, was pointless. Nick was a great soccer player and the fastest runner in the 100-meter dash. What was he going to do to catch up with some honors student? Wait, where are you going in such a hurry? To the library. Nick caught up with Cindy and put his palm on her shoulder. But the girl pulled away. Let go. I'm in a hurry to get home. She was ashamed she'd asked. She should have explained to Nick right away what she was angry about. Told her how much it hurt when even the person who said they liked you pretended not to notice you. And yet she couldn't find the strength to do it. Cindy just hoped that Nick would realize it on his own and back off, or that the important conversation between them would happen some other time, or maybe never. Were you offended by something? Nick continued. What? Tell me straight. Why do I have to play the guessing game? Cindy glanced at him and then looked away. Nick looked genuinely agitated, but the girl could no longer understand. Where was the truth and where was the lie? His freckled face was unkind to her. But how could she accurately figure it out? The girl did not have such a rich life experience as Kate. She could tell at a glance which men were assholes, which were fools, and which were shameless alphons. Normal men were not on her list. They were a very rare species, almost listed in the Red Book. Which meant there was probably something wrong with Nick too. I'd better go, the girl muttered, and you go back to your friends. They're waiting for you. I guess that's why you're mad at them, because we didn't hang out at school. Got it, Nick. Cindy didn't say anything. She was already regretting that she had started a conversation about all this and made herself hysterical. If Nick told her classmates about all this, it would be impossible to get rid of the gossip. Everyone will discuss the excellent girl who looked panicky, and then suddenly made a scene of jealousy in the middle of the street. The girl herself wondered what had gotten into her. Nick suddenly said gray. A week ago, he told me Kate was in 8th grade. Laughs like a hyena. That is not laughing, but rather shrieking. That's why it's embarrassing to go to comedies with her. The whole room turns around. Cindy looked at him in surprise, not understanding why Nick was telling her this. And the man continued. Michael was telling about her profile, that she is in such a hurry when she eats pizza that she sometimes starts the hour. Why are you telling me all this? Because I want you to realize I'd rather not tell anyone we're dating. Then I'd rather start picking your brain, and there's no picking your brain without picking your brain. Nick shook his head. You can't. Guys are gonna want to know more about us. They'll start asking me if I'm gonna have to do it or not. And then they'll start laughing at me or make up all sorts of stories. You don't want that. Is it always like this with guys? Cindy asked incredulously. I always thought only girls gossiped, but even Betty, who's dating Sasha, tells me a little about him. It's different with guys. Nick cut me off, so let's forget about it. Or are we gonna keep bringing it up? Should I get down on my knees in front of you, or what? So you don't get mad. Cindy shook her head guiltily. No, really. I'm so sorry, Nick. I didn't know it was like that. I was just offended that you weren't paying attention to me. And Nick waved his hand. Okay, forget it. Let's go home. Let's talk or something, get to know each other better. You, for example, why do you study so hard? Do your parents make you do it? I don't have a father, only a mother, and she doesn't force me to study. I mean, she says, of course, that you should try to achieve something in life, but she doesn't punish me for bad grades. If only they scold you a little and your grades are never bad. Nick grinned. What does she scold you for? For B's or something. I sometimes get C's for C's, though rarely. The girl tried to remember when it was the last time, but couldn't. I think it was in the 3rd grade, when she forgot her acorn craft at home and made a new one out of whatever was at hand. It turned out shoddily, and she got a grade accordingly. But it was not very polite to bring it up in front of Nick, who had C's in every subject except physical education. Lucky, sighed Nick. And my father is only so much at my throat because of the 2s that he wants me to become an academician. I've had it all. And what does your father do? An engineer. He gets a trifle at the factory and expects the same from me or a PhD, no less. I'm sick of it. Nick's face was so upset that Cindy felt involuntary pity for him. She knew that Nick was good at soccer, had seen how he deftly practiced on the uneven bars. Maybe that was his talent. A man can't be good at everything. If you want, I'll help you with your studies, she said. You can ask me if you don't understand something, and I'll help you. And with math too. Nick asked incredulously. Cindy nodded. It's no big deal. I stopped understanding those equations in 6th grade. There's nothing you can do about it. If you put in a little time and effort, you can succeed, I'm sure of it. If only there were time, Nick muttered. Then he looked at Cindy. Can you help me with what? If it's studying, I already said yes, I can tutor you. Nick shook his head. No time. Maybe after the match. You know about the school championship, right? Next week we play the 8th B, and 2 weeks later we play the 9th. What kind of math is that? But what can I do to help? Cindy wondered. Look at your homework, Nick asked. I'll just look at the solution honestly, but I'll write it all myself from memory. Cindy wanted to refuse. She always refused in such cases, but something stopped her. Probably the memory of how offended Nick had looked a few minutes ago when they'd been discussing boys whose gossip she didn't want to repeat. Well, okay, she nodded. I'll bring the notebook tomorrow. Nick kissed her on the cheek. Cindy, you're a miracle. The girl realized she had done the right thing. It was her first kiss, even if not on the lips. It was something to die for, not to mention sacrificing her homework. Nick walked her to the driveway. Cindy went inside and waited for the dad to leave, watching him through the window. Then got out and ran to the school again. The girl saw the janitor from afar, approaching the trash can with a large bag, and panickedly shouted, "Wait." The janitor looked at her in surprise. Cindy ran over to the trash can and stuck her hand inside, ignoring the greasy brownie bags and wet juice boxes. Lucky the box, she fumbled for it pretty quickly. The girl smiled gleefully at the janitor and explained she had accidentally thrown it away. "Excuse me, please, I'll be going. I won't bother you anymore." For a while, her strange relationship with Nick continued like this. While at school, they both pretended not to notice each other. Perhaps Cindy was ignoring Nick a little too much, because her roommate had noticed several times that she was spinning like a frying pan. Then Nick would walk her home, and the girl would sneak him some notebooks. It was like that, unusual for her, that Cindy's heart was terrified every time, but she held herself back, believing she was doing it for love. Naive fool. Cindy didn't realize until the last minute that Nick was playing her for a fool. Betty opened her eyes. She had met her roommate at the grocery store, completely by accident and out of the blue. "Hi." Betty nodded as if they hadn't seen each other in a long time. "How are you doing?" Cindy was just remembering the last time Nick had given her a kiss goodbye, so she was in a dreamy mood. She didn't immediately realize what she was talking about. "Okay," she nodded. "And you too," said Betty, studying her with an attentive gaze. Then she asked suddenly, "Are you alone tonight?" "Yes, my mom went to work and told me to." "I didn't mean yours at all." "Mom meant." Betty wrinkled her nose. "I meant Nick." Cindy flinched and nearly dropped the bottle of milk she'd just taken off the shelf. Panicked, she looked around as if she expected to see a whole crowd of classmates, eavesdropping on them, and only then asked, "How did you know?" "Well, it's hard not to recognize when you're constantly rushing at him in class. I'm surprised he didn't notice. Although Nick is kind of a jerk. He doesn't see anything but his own precious self." At first, Cindy was going to deny it. saying Betty thought it was all just to protect Nick and herself. But Betty's insults left Cindy no choice. She had to protect Nick from the insults. Whatever it took. "We're dating," the girl confessed, feeling herself begin to blush as usual. It's been almost 3 weeks since Valentine's Day, so long, Betty wondered. It can't be. I'd certainly noticed something, and so would everyone else. But you didn't notice, Cindy sighed. You saw me looking back at him. It's not about you. I mean Nick. I haven't noticed him looking at you the way you look at him. We agreed beforehand not to talk about it at school. Nick doesn't want anyone else to know about our relationship. The incredulous look on Betty's face at those words changed to an angry one. So it was Nick's idea. You weren't the one who asked for it. Cindy nodded. Yeah, Nick said it was so the other guys wouldn't gossip. They're always talking about each other's girls, and he didn't want them blabbing about me. What an asshole, Betty said with feeling. Who's Nick? Dazed? Asked Cindy. You're what? Why? Because he's trying to be caring, messing with your head. What an actor. I didn't even think of him. Cindy looked at her friend, not understanding, and she sighed. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but Nick is lying. He's using you, using you, using you. I don't know you know how. Betty thought deeply, and then resumed firmly. Nick's been getting some pretty good grades in algebra and chemistry and physics lately. Did you help him? You're cheating. Yes, Cindy nodded, embarrassed. She remembered some of the times in the past when she hadn't let her friend see her work, saying that the teacher might notice, that remembering it now was very embarrassing. However, Betty didn't seem to remember it. What kind of asshole is he? She repeated in an angry voice, He's got you fooled. Do you think he doesn't love me? Cindy asked. But why? Maybe he does, but not you. Betty answered gloomily. Last Sunday, I saw him kissing with my own eyes. Cindy was completely crushed by this statement. She had no reason not to believe Betty. Betty had never lied to her before, and there wasn't much point. Besides, something in her friend's face told her that everything she said was true. It was impossible to lie with such an indignant look on her face. Although Nick had lied to her, pretending to be in love, Betty must have taken her silence for disbelief, because she added, I saw them at the mall. You know, in that area on the top floor, where all the coffee shops are, I believe you. In a faint voice, Cindy said, Don't feel bad, I would. Betty mumbled, I've known Nick since he was a kid. His parents are strict about his grades, so he probably decided to take care of you to get away from you for a while. I'm sick of the scandals at home. I got it, Betty. I should probably go. Cindy left the basket of groceries and headed for the exit. Her heart was pounding in her ears, rumbling in her ears, wanting to jump out of her chest. Hold on, Betty shouted after her. If it gets too bad, call me. What can I do for you? I'll help. I'd rather not worry about that idiot at all. He's not worth it. It was easy to say hang on. Cindy had no idea what to hold on to when Paul seemed to be slipping away from her. All her hopes, all the joy of the last few days turned to nothing. She had thought Nick genuinely loved her, worried about her honor, worried about her. And it turned out that he was really only worried about his grades. He used her instead of Nick or a calculator. And he was kissing someone else. And it's a good thing he wasn't laughing with his buddies behind her back. Cindy felt she couldn't bear to hear any gossip about herself. And yet Nick was honest with her about one thing. He never kissed her on the lips, always only on the cheek or sent air kisses. He only really kissed someone he liked. Or maybe he was just squeamish about kissing for studying. Cindy felt like she didn't care anymore. The girl still hadn't bought groceries. That day she said she was sick and stayed home. She listened indifferently to her mother's reproaches. Fortunately, Kate was too tired after work and did not ask her daughter about the reasons for her bad mood. Cindy wouldn't have been able to think of a quick answer. In the morning, she had a meeting with Nick. Cindy struggled to keep herself from once again citing a cold and staying home. Talking to Nick was scaring the crap out of her. Gotta go, the girl told herself. Talking to Nick would have to happen anyway. So why put it off until later? Nick was waiting for her in the square at his usual spot. Cindy saw him from a distance and almost showed cowardice. She wanted to avoid him and take a different route to school. and yet she didn't make it in time. Nick looked up from his phone and saw the girl and smiled broadly. "Hi, you slept in late again today." Cindy clapped nervously and walked towards him. She came closer and in a wooden voice said, "Give me the notebook." Nick showed a look of resentment on his face. "That instead of a greeting, some math notebook is more important to you than my person." Cindy almost nodded yes. To her, girls are great. Nerd, as they called her in class, learning came first. And rightly so. Textbooks and notebooks couldn't get her into the situation she was in now. She should have kept studying. Not to drop out of the learning activity, to hide in it from the whole world. There it was simple and clear from formulas and equations, did not want to sob in her voice and call herself a fool. In the world of study and knowledge, she was smarter than everyone else, while in reality, foolish and believing the first person you meet, give it away. She repeated, "Here." Nick took her notebook out of her backpack and held it out to Cindy. "What's the matter?" "Maybe you can explain." "It's about you," answered the girl you go out with on weekends while I'm out of sight. For a second, Nick looked dumbfounded by this phrase, but immediately pulled himself together. "What the hell? Who told you that nonsense?" "No one. I saw it myself," Cindy said. She didn't want to betray her friend. It was enough that Betty had opened her eyes to what was going on. "I shouldn't have dragged her any deeper into this story." "What could you have seen?" Nick muttered. Without much confidence in his voice, however, it seemed. There was something to see, and Nick felt bad that Cindy had witnessed it all. "Let's just not talk about it," the girl asked, "please. I don't like to remember." Nick nodded. Cindy added, "And I won't let you cheat anymore." Nick muttered, "What's the point of hanging out with you anymore? You're no use to me anymore, except for studying. You live like a robot, only formula cramming. I don't need a girl like you for nothing." Cindy walked away toward the school, and Nick kept shouting after her, hoping to sting her more. But that was almost impossible after what had already happened. Cindy didn't care. She was afraid that Nick would start talking about what had happened, and mentally prepared herself to move out. But fortunately, that didn't happen. Apparently, Nick didn't want to make a big deal out of it. As they say, for the rest of high school. They never looked at each other again or said another word. That was the end of it. Cindy never tried to date again. She wasn't asked. She was determined to finish high school with honors, then university, and only then think about her personal life. The plan turned out to be rather naive, because fate did not ask what and in what order to provide her. And it provided Cindy Molly. In the first year of the humanitarian university, where the girl entered with ease, passing all the necessary exams. This happened a couple of weeks after admission. Cindy was studying to be an economist. The group was female. The only guy, modest Pavlik, was stretched out in a sweater and glasses. No one for a representative of the male sex seriously, and did not count. In such a society, Cindy was easy and cozy. There was no need to blush at a casual glance. There was nowhere to expect a trick, but she hadn't made any real friends yet. I didn't believe it could be fixed. And then Molly. They'd met in an English class. The classroom was unusually crowded. Half the faces were unfamiliar to Cindy. The English girl looked terribly annoyed. The academic department had mixed up the timetable, she explained. They put the economists' lecture together with the sociologists. How are you going to be accommodated here? And most importantly, what materials should I give you? You yourself should try to teach in such an environment. The auditorium was filling to capacity. Cindy was in the front row, so her seat was unpopular. It was one of the first to be taken. A bright blonde in a short dress flew into the auditorium. Just before the bell rang, she dropped onto a bench and whispered to Cindy. Barely had time to flirt with the conductor on the bus and missed her stop. Can you believe it? Cindy stared at her for all she was worth. The statement seemed completely unexpected and out of place. And yet the way the girl spoke to her, in a friendly way, like old acquaintances, bought Cindy up. Wow, she muttered. Just to say something. The girl nodded. I said to myself, wow, Molly. Well, you're a piece of work. You've already started meeting old men on buses. He was 50 years old at least, but that's okay. It'll give us something to remember when we retire. It's probably not every day that he and I meet a student conductor. Let him think he's still on the horse." And Science quietly English woman tapped her pen on the table and looked expressively at the girls. Cindy was embarrassed, but Molly didn't care. She took out her notebook and stared at the teachers with pure naive eyes. It was impossible to imagine that such an angel could flirt with anyone. Cindy thought the girl was joking, and that made her even more sympathetic. Molly was too lively and cheerful Cindy herself seriousness. The girls complimented each other, and it served as the basis of their friendship for many years. The lecture began, and Cindy forgot about her neighbor for a while, plunging into the usual maelstrom of her studies. She wrote down the teacher's explanations, asked a couple of questions. Out of this whirl, she was pulled out and stopped writing by a pen. Cindy opened it and looked with surprise at the rod completely empty. And yet the pen had been bought a few days ago. Had she really managed to write off so much since then? I can't believe it. Here. Cindy heard the stranger's whisper, and a pink, glittery pen lay on the table in front of her, with some kind of pastries on the end. Cindy hesitated to take such a marvel in her hand. She bought the cheapest stationery because she was always short of money and had only seen such luxuries in shop windows. 10 years ago and now, such things made her feel delighted and envious. Whatever you say, but deep down in every woman of the fairest sex lives a little girl with pigtails. Cindy glanced at her neighbor. She was smiling. Cindy smiled shyly back at her. "Thank you, call on me if you need anything." Cindy winked at the girl as well. "My name is Molly, by the way." "And I'm Cindy." Girls' silence. Yelled at the teachers, Cindy lowered her head. For the first time in her life, she wasn't upset about the remark she had received. In Cindy's hands was the most beautiful pen in the world, and in her soul was hope, hope that her life was about to change. As the lecture bell rang, Molly grabbed her roommate by the arm. "Do you want to go to the cafeteria and get something to eat?" she asked. "I'm just starving." Cindy didn't want to eat, but nodded happily. She was reluctant to part with her new girl acquaintance. It seemed as if Molly's energy was transmitted to her, as if she could become just as lively and beautiful if she tried. "Take your pen," she said, holding it out, and the pink miracle. "You've been a great help to me." "Thank you." "Keep it." Molly waved her hand. "It'll be a gift in honor of our acquaintance." But Cindy rummaged through her bag, desperately hoping to find something in return. Not a single thing worthy of being given, and there was nothing there but crumpled and crumbled bus tickets, and a caramel that had disintegrated at the bottom of it, which was kind of embarrassing. "If anything, you can buy me coffee with Molly. That would be nice of you. Buy me a large cappuccino, the most expensive one on the menu." "Okay," Cindy nodded. "Oh, come on, I was kidding. The guests have enough pizza for me. I think with my figure I can afford it." "I think you can afford anything with your figure," Cindy assured her. And she said it without envy. At least she couldn't complain about the lack of waistline, though she wasn't a long-legged blonde like Molly. But you shouldn't go overboard with the carbons either. Giggled the one. "Well, let's go quickly, or they will take all the tables, while we dig." Years later, remembering that moment, Cindy thought that she probably resembled a dog following its master on a leash. If she could go back to freshman year, she would never do that. She would sit in the back of the classroom, pretend she wasn't feeling well, and run out into the hallway. Wouldn't come to class at all. But what's done is done that day. The girls became friends. "Look, what a handsome," whispered Molly in the dining room, pointing to a blonde man standing in line. "What do you think of him?" "He's okay," Cindy nodded. She had no idea what to say in situations like this, simply because she'd never been in a situation like this before. Molly nodded with a thoughtful look. "You're right, it's nothing. He's not what you call handsome. Look how his ears stick out." Cindy mumbled something vague. The blonde seemed quite ordinary. A guy like a guy, not handsome, not ugly. There was no point in even discussing him. "I'm free as the wind right now," Molly informed her. "I broke up with my ex a month ago, and I don't want to get into a relationship yet. My ex was certainly handsome. And brainy, but boring. Anyway, I don't want to fall for it anymore. I need a break. Sorting myself out, so to speak." Cindy only nodded, fearing the question that was bound to follow, and did. Are you seeing anyone? Molly asked. Not at the moment. And before? Cindy blushed. Did she really look like the kind of girl no guy would ever look at? And her new friend had noticed that right away. Used to date, Cindy replied. She had long ago decided that the long history with Nick and his kisses on the cheek could still be included in that list. Not telling Molly all the details, though, or she'd be ashamed. Why? Molly was surprised. You seem nice. Interestingly, Cindy remembered that with the same word nothing, not just dubbed unattractive blonde, but decided not to pay attention to it. It was unlikely that Molly had put it that way, wanting to offend her. I don't like anyone, she replied. Everyone's boring. Here Cindy almost did not pretend to be a girl who had never really fallen in love with anyone. It was like she'd been cheated on by Nick. Something burned out inside her. So we're gonna fix it. Molly clapped her hands. How boring this is, and you're bored. I'm bored after I broke up with my boyfriend. Molly started curling her fingers. See how many reasons we have to go somewhere fun? Where exactly? Cindy asked. A nightclub, where does everyone usually go to have fun? At the mention of a nightclub, Cindy felt a thrill mixed with excitement. She'd never been to a place like this before. It was like something her mom would scold her if I went there. Still, it wasn't that she didn't want to go there. It was the curiosity of a scientific explorer. Cindy wanted to take one look at the dance floor. It seemed that if she went there, something amazing would happen. She would meet a prince on a white horse, someone who was no match for Nick the scoundrel. Let's go. Cindy nodded. Just maybe tomorrow. It's Thursday, we have to get ready. Certainly not today. Marina agreed. I still have to run to a manicure, do my hair. Here Friday is the right time. In the clubs, the movement starts to be the most fun. Actually, Cindy meant that she would prepare for classes, but she did not argue with her new friend. Anyway, it all worked out the way she wanted it to. Although after Molly's words about the manicure and hairstyle, the girl felt a little uneasy. Cindy herself was not going to prepare so thoroughly for this outing. What manicure? Cindy hadn't even used nail polish, just watered her nails. And her hair was just an ordinary bob. Cindy had no idea what else she could do with her hair. But it wasn't until about an hour after talking to Molly that it mattered. And the girl realized she had nothing to wear. Cindy's meager closet consisted of modest dresses or equally modest jeans with no holes in the knees, A's, guests, and such. None of it was clearly appropriate for the club. Cindy didn't know how to break the news to her friend. It was a shame to tell the truth, but showing up at the club dressed up in some plaid dress would surely be another 100 days. The girl decided to use the favorite excuse of all liars. That same night, Molly called and said sick. Must have had something cold to drink, muttered. She blushed at her own lie. I'm sorry, Molly, I don't think I can go with you. You looked healthy this morning. Her friend said incredulously. Cindy waved her hands, then realized that Molly couldn't see her and said, I have a weak throat. I catch colds quickly. At least in this? Cindy didn't lie. During her school years, she was more likely than other classmates to stay home with a sore throat. Her throat had always been her weak spot. And for the first time, that fact had somehow come in handy for Cindy. Molly was silent for a moment and sighed. It's a shame. I've already gone to the hairdresser and ironed my dress. I have one blue one to match my eyes. I love to wear it, but I rarely have an occasion. I'm sorry, Cindy said. She was really uncomfortable with the sadness that flashed in her friend's voice. Well, it's all right. We'll go some other time, and you've already got your dress ready. What kind do you have? Cindy had no ready answer to that question. She hesitated, and Molly grinned. So you don't have the right dress? You're a liar, Michael. You should have come clean instead of making up that cold story. I do have a dress. Cindy started off simple. Just tell me, do you have the energy to go to the club? Molly interrupted her in truth. I do, Cindy admitted. But there's still nothing to wear. I'm sorry. It's nothing. It's no big deal. Anyway, we'll go to my place after class tomorrow. What time is your class end? 4 o'clock. We'll pick something up at my place too. As it turns out, we're both slimmer today. I'll tell you one of my dresses will be fine. Uncomfortable. Somehow, Cindy tried to object. It's embarrassing to stay at home until retirement and never go out. Molly replied, "Meet me tomorrow at 4 at the bus stop and no talking." That night, Cindy couldn't sleep for a long time. At first, she felt remorse for starting a friendship with a lie. Then the anticipation of what awaited her the next night. Cindy still couldn't quite believe that Molly had forgiven her. And not only had she forgiven her, borrowing her dress to go out, going to the club seemed to her like a Cinderella ball. It seemed to Cindy that something wonderful was bound to happen there. At 2 p.m., she met her new friend. Molly looked stunning in her light-colored dress, and Cindy exhaled with admiration. "What a beauty! Are you going to wear that to the club?" Molly looked at her in surprise and shook her head. "No, of course not. I told you I chose the blue ones, I forgot. And these are plain and old. Besides, I bought it 2 years ago. I only wear it to my classes. It's a shame to throw it away, to throw away such a miracle." It almost seemed like sacrilege to Cindy. How many outfits did her new friend have, if a perfectly decent dress? She considered sending it to the trash. Finding herself next to Molly, Cindy felt like the center of attention again. Or rather, not herself, but her friend. She could feel the gaze of every guy she met, directed past her to Molly. And yet it was strange. Cindy had never been friends with such beauties, so she didn't know how it was. The bus was gone for 20 minutes, and when it did come, it was, like, hacked. "I can't stand it." "I'd rather walk," Molly said to Cindy, but she smiled. "Luckily, we won't have to stand for long." Cindy didn't know why her friend had emphasized the word "we," but it soon became clear. Molly entered the bus, looked around, and dragged Cindy toward the cab. There was a group of guys sitting there, flipping jokes. Laughing at the sight of them, Cindy experienced the usual embarrassment, wanting to run away. Molly, on the other hand, seemed to blossom. "You'll see everything now," she whispered. To her friend, "I'll see what Cindy wanted to ask, but didn't have time." Molly put her finger to her lips and turned away. The noise in the crowd slowly began to verse, or rather changed from bags to interested whispers. "Have a seat." One of the guys stood up and pointed to the vacated seat. Molly shook her head. "Mercy, sure, but I'm not leaving my friend." The guys stared at Cindy as if they were seeing her for the first time. The girl wasn't even surprised by that, most likely. Until Molly pointed out the existence of her friend to her, no one around her had ever suspected the so-called invisibility effect. Cindy had long since gotten used to it. The silence was lingering. Or did it just seem that way to her? Then another of the guys got up from his seat as well. "Sit down," he nodded at the vacated seat. It was said without much enthusiasm, just out of politeness, so as not to fall flat in front of Molly. "Thank you, I'm fine." Cindy tried to refuse, but her friend forced her down, grabbed her arm, and pulled her along. "Thank you." The boys smiled at Molly. "You are very, very, very polite." Such behavior is rare these days. The boys waved it off with a deliberately indifferent look. No big deal. Molly and Cindy thought they weren't so polite, really. 2 steps away from this crowd, a little aside, stood an elderly woman with a cart, was on her way from the store or dacha. And not a single person on the bus, including this company, even thought about giving her a seat. Cindy's heart clenched painfully. She had always overreacted to injustice. Molly made small talk with the guys. "Where are you guys from?" she asked, fluttering her eyelashes flirtatiously. "Are you studying or working part-time?" "I study at Polytechnic," answered the one who gave her a seat. "But they're all Apple guys. Alex works in a factory." He didn't have enough brains to get into the right place. Alex gave him a friendly shove in the side and muttered something through his teeth. The others laughed. Molly, as if nothing had happened, continued to smile. "And my friend and I are going from the university. I'm studying sociology. And my friend is a future economist. We're going to study science, but it's sneaky. You're looking over there." The girl, without answering her, got up from her seat, touched the old woman with the carts by the arm. "Sit down, please." The woman turned around in surprise. Probably she was not expecting a proposal from this side, and smiled modestly. "Why don't you sit down, Molly? I'm not tired." "I also said, Cindy, please sit down." "Well, thank you very much." God bless you." As she continued to sprinkle her thanks, the old lady sank into the seat next to Molly. She immediately shrank into the wall, trying to move away from her neighbor, and looked at Cindy with shock. It seemed to be a complete surprise to this girl. The conversation in their company quieted down at once. Alex, obeying either remorse or some incomprehensible inner impulse, also stood up and gave his place to another woman. No one else spoke a word. Their acquaintance was cut short before it could begin. Molly must have had a lot on her mind because she lashed out at her new friend. As soon as they got off the bus, "What's gotten into you?" she asked. "Cindy made me sit next to that old woman." "For half an hour. What did she do to bother you?" Cindy asked in surprise. She seemed like a very nice woman, Molly. Nice. She smelled so much like Corvalol that I was probably deaf now too. I'd had enough of that scent in my grandmother's lifetime. But I couldn't sit with her standing there with those bags, could I? Cindy said shyly. "You saw how old she was. It must be hard to spend so much time on your feet. We get old sometime too. And I'm not sure anyone will give us a seat," Molly replied. The girls were silent, thinking about their own things. Then Molly sighed. "And it's okay to smell. I didn't even have time to ask the guy for his number. I thought he'd take the initiative, but that woman freaked everybody out. We didn't have a conversation. All my efforts were for nothing." "Did you like him?" Cindy asked. "The blonde one. I always like blondes. I'm sorry, please. I didn't realize it would come out like that." Molly waved her hand irritably. "Okay, forget it. If it's not this blonde, there will be another one. It's not like some guy from Polytechnic is the end of the world. Maybe it's for the best that we didn't meet. I'll meet someone better later. Maybe even tonight at some major's club." These thoughts must have comforted Molly, because she didn't grumble anymore. She entered her apartment and waved her friend to the right. "Don't go, that's my father's room. He doesn't like it when people poke their noses into his den, and there's nothing to see there, furniture and rags. Let's go straight to my place. I'll look for something for you." "Do you live with your father?" Cindy asked. "Yes, my mother divorced him when I was 3 and moved to a beautiful country far away. Molly explained. She found some Italian and traded me and Daddy for him." "Traitor. Well, we're used to it without her." Molly's voice was filled with resentment and annoyance. Apparently her words were a lie and she wasn't used to it at all. "And my dad left me and my mom," said Cindy. "When I was little, I hardly remember him." Sister-in-law, Molly sighed. "Well, let's forget about it. Let's find you a dress. Let's have fun." Molly's room impressed Cindy. The whole desk was littered with makeup, jars, and boxes. There was only a little space for textbooks on the very edge. On the wall hung the picture of movie hotties. But the main place in the room was occupied by a huge closet old, but inspire the guest involuntary respect. Molly swung open its door and wondered, "What kind of dress will we choose for you, green under the color of your eyes or classic?" "A little black dress. I have gray eyes," Cindy noted. "My dress will make anyone's eyes green." "You bet," her friend assured her. "But if you don't want to wear black, then I won't argue. Especially since it's a win-win either way." Deep down, Cindy was afraid that in a black dress will look too gloomy, like a singer crying from the cemetery. However, Molly, she turned out to be right. Black color is amazingly silk, her face and blonde hair. "Now let's do the hair," said Molly. "Better not," said Cindy. "Let's leave it in a simple ponytail like it is now." "Why is that?" Cindy couldn't explain why she didn't want to change anything else about her appearance. The girl looked at her new image in the black dress and did not recognize herself Cindy. It seemed that by changing something else she would lose all her individuality. Molly must not have been bored with her friend, because she waved her hand. "Okay, well, whatever, at least do your makeup. It's not like you're going out like that." Cindy didn't know what it meant to put on makeup for a club. She usually just did her eyeliner and left it at that. She decided to limit herself, and now Molly didn't have to talk her into it. She turned on some show on the computer and good. She sat in front of the mirror for an hour and a half, picking up the look, as she put it. Cindy watched her furtively and realized that such a thing was incomprehensible to her. It was as if Molly were a prisoner of a different mold. Unremarkable in her studies and a star in everything from her looks to her relationships, Cindy didn't know herself, whether she would want to trade places with her or not. This world of carefree fun and glitz both attracted and repelled her when it was about 7 o'clock, and the plot of the stupid show had turned into a mess in Cindy's head. Molly rose from her seat and clapped her hands together. Ready to have fun, Cindy's friend was totally confused and didn't know what she wanted anymore. Next to brightly made up, perky, and petty, she felt like a pale moth once again. No dress helped. I guess someone like Molly could only be born. Cindy decided sadly to herself, no matter how much you adorn yourself on the outside, when you're boring, it doesn't make things better on the inside. The nightclub with music and plenty of people made an overwhelming impression on the girl. She felt like a child entering the circus for the first time. She followed Molly and tried her best not to lag behind and not to get lost in the crowd, looking around and wondering how Molly had gotten here, pointed her finger forward and asked something. Cindy couldn't hear a word she said. What did she ask? I said, shall we go dancing or shall we have a drink first? Cindy shook her head confusedly. I'd rather just sit here. I'll see what's going on first, and all the dancing. See you soon. Molly is radiant and beautiful. Walked on, and Cindy gave her a wistful look. She was already regretting not going to stay with her. Alone in a place like this was too much for Cindy, but she couldn't dance. She couldn't do it right away. By some miracle, she found a free table and sat down at it, not knowing what to do next. The music rumbled in her ears and urged her to move not toward the dance floor, but toward the exit. Why? I just came here. The girl thought in her heart. Couldn't I just sit at home and watch a movie or study for a seminar? Cindy wanted to turn invisible, so that no one would see her. Unfortunately, it turned out the other way around. It's free here. Cindy flinched when she heard that voice behind her. A skinny brunette looked to be the same age as her or slightly older. Bored looking at her and seemingly swaying slightly drunk. Frightened, the girl thought. Drunk people instilled an unreported fear in her. You never know what to expect from them. With a loose nod, Cindy nodded. I'm leaving now. Come on, sit there, the stranger waved his hand. I'm not going to hit on you. I promise. This statement simultaneously calmed and insulted Cindy. It turned out she wasn't the kind of girl to hit on. The stranger put the glass on the table and sat down next to Cindy, moving the glass towards her treat. As yet, thank you. You don't need to be sparing. I'm not going to get you drunk. It's a non-alcoholic cocktail. Cindy carefully took the glass and thanked the guy. Thank you. Why did you order it if you don't want it yourself? The girl. I just didn't have time to give it to her. We broke up. That happens too. Cindy almost asked, but held back from coming to the club together to have fun, and then breaking up for good. It was like the plot of a melodrama. Having read romance stories, Cindy felt sorry for the guy. I sympathize, she said. It must have been unexpected. Something like that happened to me too. Cindy thought back again to the long-ago story with Nick. If she didn't admit that it had happened years ago, she could consider herself a tragic heroine too. The conniving passerby had tricked her and been had. Maybe the guy who was in jail. Now the same thing happened right next to her. Heaven out of the blue, said the stranger. Cindy replied the girl. Nothing. If I tell you everything? Asked the boy. I'd like to share it with someone. Sure, agreed Cindy. I don't know if I can help, but I'll do what I can. The boy's look, like that of an abandoned puppy, touched Cindy. She didn't seem to be drinking, but she felt a little dizzy. There's not much to tell, Kevin said. We dated for almost a year, and now all of a sudden she's decided she's not happy with my status? Cindy asked. Status in society, Kevin deciphered. I work as a courier, and she wants an oligarch and not soft cocktails, but wine from France. Cindy, dumbfounded, shook her head. She was far from wealthy herself, so she sincerely sympathized with the guy. How can you mix love and money? With indignation, thought the girl. And such relationships people call romance. Perhaps it is even better. That you have broken up, said Cindy. You think, surely, if that girl hadn't betrayed you now, she would have done it later. And then it probably would have hurt even more. You'd be too used to each other. I hadn't thought of that, Kevin said thoughtfully. I guess you're right. At least someone understood me, right? Because my friend, for example, said that I should get a prestigious job so that next time I could find a cooler girl and rub my ex's nose in it. That's stupid, Cindy said. You can try to buy love with money, but will what you buy really be love? Kevin cast her a surprised look and shook his head. Are you a philosopher? Cindy was embarrassed and took a sip from her glass. The cocktail turned out to be delicious. Cherry with lemon, flavored and very cold. I need a drink too, Kevin said. Drown my sorrow in alcohol. Tomorrow I'll think about what to do next. In the meantime, there's no need to drown any sorrow. With a sudden panic in her voice, Cindy said, You don't have to change jobs to drown yourself. You can't drink either, Kevin muttered. What do you want me to do? Cindy shrugged her shoulders in embarrassment. Who should I ask? She wasn't a psychologist, a relationship expert. Cindy herself wasn't getting anywhere in her personal life. Who would give her advice? Kevin suddenly snapped his fingers, came up with an idea. Let's get out of here. Where to? Anywhere. We'll walk around for a while, get some air. Tell me what mysterious stranger I met on my way, mysterious stranger. A little stammering, interrogated Cindy, and looked around as if she expected to see someone else. I'm talking about you. Fool. Kevin laughed and seeing that she was still hesitating added, I told you I wouldn't bother you, remember? But I didn't come here alone, I can't. Cindy tried to look among the dancing people. Molly, but the best thing would be to ask her friend for advice, because more experienced and skillful in such matters would surely tell Cindy how to act. The girl was both afraid to go with Kevin and something that caused her to follow him with sympathy. A kinship of lonely and unhappy souls or something more. Finally, Cindy saw Molly, but she was in the epicenter of the music, and the festivities picked up. And among the club guests, some blonde guy, and danced with him. Even more beautiful and bright than usual, Molly forgot about her friend. At this point, she was clearly not ready to give advice to anyone. Cindy had only herself to rely on. What's your answer? Kevin asked. I only need to ask my friend for an excuse, she replied. Molly and I are here together. Kevin laughed. That's right. Girlfriend or strict mommy? Cindy smiled embarrassedly. That's right. Okay, she doesn't seem to have time for me right now. I'll send her a text now and we can go. Cindy typed a message to her friend, apologizing for her escape and promising to explain everything later. Something told her that she wouldn't see Molly and Cindy before midnight. They went outside and Kevin asked what the ladies' preferences would be. Where shall we go? Cindy didn't have any preferences and she shrugged. I don't know. We could go to the waterfront, sit on a bench. It's cold, Kevin objected. And it's starting to rain. As if to confirm his words, a drop fell on us. Kevin smiled and said, There's a pizzeria nearby. Let's sit there. It's warm, dry, and quiet there. Not like that diner we just left. Cindy was a little relieved, contrary to Kevin's assurances that he wouldn't molest her. There was still some suspicion in her heart, and hitting on anyone in the pizzeria would probably be uncomfortable. Despite the late hour, the pizzeria was crowded. Cindy finally relaxed, feeling like she was in her own element. Not in the student cafeteria, of course, but in a similar place. But then she tensed up again. She didn't belong here this evening. The girl's beautiful dress stood out from the local fashions and t-shirts. Cindy was peered at with interest, as if she were an alien. Uncomfortable. Everyone's staring. Cindy whispered to her companion. He waved his hand nonchalantly. Let them think we've run away from the wedding. They took a table in the far corner. Kevin ordered and looked at Cindy. So tell me who you are, where you're from. How did you get into this party? Somehow it seems to me that you don't go to these events very often, and you don't get excited about them. To be honest, tonight was the first time I came to a nightclub, Cindy admitted. A friend called me, and I couldn't have done it on my own. Cindy said it, and suddenly felt relieved. So be it. If Kevin is used to socializing with a party girl, he'll get away with it right away. And if the guy is normal, then maybe their acquaintance has a chance. What exactly Cindy herself did not know, did not go, and did the right thing, approved Kevin. People in such places pay those more build-up than they represent in fact. The guards are insolent. It's better to be in places like this, as it's all human. Why did you come to the club? Asked the girl. If you don't like it yourself, it's probably all about depression, Kevin replied. I'm not stupid. I felt for some time that my relationship with Cindy was going downhill. That's why I wanted to get away to a place with lots of light, lots of music. Life is boiling, but the girl understood, though she herself, when she was in a bad mood, was drawn not to people, but to the bed. Turn away with her nose against the wall, forget about everyone and everything, and cry to her heart's content. Everyone has different ways of dealing with sadness. Maybe that's what helped Kevin. I was in the clear, I really was, Kevin smiled. I didn't go to the club for nothing, because I met you there, and I should drink to that. They clinked tea glasses, and Cindy began to smile too. The tension had left her. It seemed that she had known Kevin for a very long time, as long as she had known herself. The guy was as ridiculous a kid as Cindy herself, two underdogs who by some whim of fate had happened to meet this evening. To Cindy's relief, she had little to tell about herself. She wasn't ready for that yet. She said she was in her first year of economics, and that was the end of it. But Cindy listened with interest to the story of Kevin. The guy was really unlucky in life. His high school diploma had been ruined by a math teacher who, according to Kevin, had a grudge against him. A nasty grandmother lives in the same building as us and once had a fight with my mother, the boy explained. And you were the worst. I wanted to go to engineering, but with my diploma, I was not accepted. And all the long-standing women's quarrels, whether my mother did not say hello to math or something else. In general, the road to university was closed to me. Kevin was quickly fired from his first job too, for one single late arrival, he said. His mother was sick one morning and didn't have any pills at home. While I was running to the pharmacy, the director made the decision to fire me, Kevin said. It was strict there. Now the guy worked as a courier, but did not intend to do this for the rest of his life. Maybe grow up to office plankton, and then look and get into the bosses, he joked. There are all sorts of things in life. This carefree attitude to his own failures and bought Cindy. She herself could not do that and looked at Kevin from available on the hardships of life almost with admiration. Time passed unnoticed during the conversation. The girl came to her senses only when a message from her mother came on her phone asking her when she would come home. It was 11 o'clock and Cindy had to get ready for bed. I guess I'll be going now, apologizing, in a scared tone, the girl said. Nice talking to you, but my mother's looking for me too. I'm afraid there'll be a scandal. I'll walk you out, Kevin volunteered. Cindy thought that if her mother saw her about the counselor, there would be a scandal. So she tried to say no. There's no need to go this way. It's only 2 blocks. I can make it at this hour. Kevin was indignant. That's out of the question. I'll walk you, and don't even think about arguing. What if something happens to you? Who knows what kind of rabble is hanging around the streets right now? Cindy couldn't think of anything to say to that. You can't tell a boy that you're more afraid of a mother's anger than of all kinds of hooligans and criminals. And so they walked through the city at night. Continuing to chat at their driveway, Cindy stopped and said, "Here we are. Thanks for walking us out. It was really nice to meet you and will you leave me your number?" asked Kevin. The girl hesitated for just a few moments and nodded. Yes, Kate met her in the hallway. She looked very wary. "Where have you been?" asked the woman. "A friend called me to a nightclub to dance," said Cindy. "I've never been there and I probably won't go again. I didn't like going to a nightclub." This admission seemed to alarm Kate. "I didn't expect you to, but it went well. No one made a pass at you." "Oh God, of course not, Mom." Cindy was ready to laugh at that assumption. Kevin did. In Cindy's eyes, he was the most polite guy she'd ever met in her life. The next day, she couldn't stand it and called Molly. She reasoned that after such a stormy night, her friend was unlikely to get out of bed before lunch. So she called her at 12 sharp. Cindy couldn't wait any longer. Molly answered in a sleepy voice after the 10th ring tone. "You're early, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you when I would bring you the dress and thank you for it." "The dress?" Molly asked again. "What do I need it for now?" "I would have waited till Monday. I'm not going anywhere else this weekend. I had too much to drink last night. I'm sorry I left without telling you, Cindy said. It's just that I met this guy and he suggested we go for a walk. That statement made Molly's feelings for the guy go away. But wow, and here I thought you were being quiet. And in general, Molly, come on. Cindy was embarrassed. It was nothing like that. We just talked. It's still good. Come on, tell me who you are. What do we talk about? Where? Cindy spent an hour describing Kevin's life to Molly in every color. It was unexpectedly exciting and interesting. Although Cindy had never approved of women's gossip, at the end of her story, Molly said thoughtfully, "You know, I don't think the groom is very promising," she said. She said, "Some 33 misfortunes and honestly, I'm not going to marry him. But I think it's a waste of time just to date him. At least he can pay for a decent restaurant." Cindy just sighed. Why did Molly have to ruin everything? She wasn't talking to Kevin for the money, but for the sake of it. Cindy couldn't say for sure why she wanted to keep in touch, just like she didn't know at what point she and Kevin started dating. At first, things had been pretty sweet, just about as they had been written about in the books. Kevin would meet her after class whenever he was free. Sometimes he gave her flowers, not flashy bouquets and hundreds of roses, but something modest like wildflowers. True, there had been a rose once. Kevin had laughingly claimed he had picked it in the park, and Cindy had never been able to understand seriously whether he had said it or not. They went to the movies a few times, and once they even kissed on the lips there, as Cindy had dreamed. Molly continued to change guys like gloves. Sometimes the girl and her next favorite went out with Cindy and Kevin on double dates. "Who are you always looking for?" Cindy once asked her friend. "Why do you have to change guys?" "I'm looking for my ideal," Molly replied. "Don't you like anyone? You've dated all kinds of boys. I think some of them were really nice." "Good ones," Molly said. "I'm looking for a great one." About a year after Cindy and Kevin started dating, the first complications began. Molly reported to her friend that she saw Kevin hugging some girl on the street. "I almost fell over," Molly said, gesticulating desperately. "At first, I thought it was a trick of the eye. I'm walking along, not touching anyone. I'm thinking about my own stuff, and then this happens. And then I saw Kevin and some blonde girl outside a cafe, probably just back from lunch." Cindy had no reason not to believe her friend. She called Kevin and asked in a trembling voice, "Is it true?" "Is what true?" He asked. "That I love you. That you're the most beautiful girl on earth too, yes." 3 times Cindy knew it wasn't true. She wasn't the most beautiful, that's all. And after what Molly had told her, Kevin's words about loving her didn't seem believable either. "You were cuddling with some girl outside a cafe," she said. "Is that true or not?" Kevin hesitated before answering. And the hesitation was enough to realize Molly was right. Cindy cried and hung up the phone. All the beautiful love story she had imagined of herself had turned into nothing. Kate could not have chosen a more inappropriate moment to enter the room. She stood looking at her daughter for a few minutes, and then asked why she was crying. She knew Kevin by then, but she rarely called him by his first name because she disliked the guy. Everything is more this or yours. After the news she'd heard, Cindy could have called him a stronger word. Just wasn't used to swearing. "Yes," she said. "What did you do?" "Same old thing," the mother asked briefly. She didn't say anything, but to admit to cheating on Kevin was to confirm her mother's beliefs, and she didn't want to do that. Cindy had only argued with her, defending Kevin. "He's not worth crying over," Kate said. She didn't wait for an answer. "If he loved you, he wouldn't have made you cry." Kevin called Cindy again that day and kept trying again the following days. Cindy didn't know where to put herself. It was summer, vacation time. She was used to going out with Kevin, and now he was gone, or rather, he wasn't there for her. Molly was also busy, going out with her boyfriend to keep herself busy and distracted. Cindy started to visit the shelter for homeless animals. She asked to volunteer there and went twice a week. She helped clean the cages. It was an activity that, in a strange way, calmed her down, Nancy's girlfriend. A few years older than her, she also worked there and accepted Cindy as her own. "I understand you very much," she said, when Cindy shared her problems with her. I started coming here just as you did, to get away from myself. Cindy looked at her questioningly. I don't know if it's polite to start asking. Nancy sighed. My father died a year ago, she said. Sitting at home alone on weekends was unbearable. So I came here. I thought I'd be more useful here. And how did that make you feel better? Cindy asked hopefully. Yeah, when every day you see people who are worse off than you are, who need your help, it takes your mind off your own problems. I've seen it. Inside the shelter, Cindy was really forgetting about Kevin. Cleaning cages, playing with the animals, learning how to give them shots. One day, walking to the shelter, Cindy came across his sick cat in the alley. The girl's heart shook with pity. Kitty, 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 kitty called out to her, squatting down. Come to me. The cat stared incredulously. Cindy looked in her purse, but there was nothing edible there except a packet of dry cookies. It was impossible to tempt the cat with such a treat. Is something wrong? Asked someone behind her back. Cindy shuddered and turned around. She only now realized that she was sitting on the sidewalk with her hands around her purse, and it probably looked like she had a stomachache. No, I'm fine, she said. Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine. Standing behind her back, the guy didn't look convinced. He was dressed in a strict suit and tie and looked like a bank employee. Cindy, in her old t-shirt with a cat shelter emblem and jeans with a hole in the knee, felt for the fly cover. Really, hesitantly, the guy clarified. You just have that look. I was trying to catch the cat, Cindy said. There he is in the bushes. The girl pointed her finger at the greenery. Nothing could be seen there, only heard rustling. We've got to swing it up. Feeling more and more foolish, Cindy said. Only there's nothing to do. The girl expected the guy to laugh at her. He'd look at her like she was stupid. Ask her if she had nothing better to do, or something like that. Instead, he looked in his briefcase. I have a hamburger with me, the young man said. If you take the dinner out of it, I think it'll do. Cindy couldn't believe her eyes. Watched him pull out a paper bag and hold it out to her. Thank you, she nodded. What about you? This must be your lunch. I'll buy more. Waved his hand. He's not that rare. Cindy smiled at the guy and took out her dinner. Called the cat Kizza again. Come here. The gray muzzle again appeared from the bushes and looked at the girl incredulously. The boy whistled, and the case seemed to be bad. He's sick, whispered Cindy. We need to feed him, then Cindy. Finally, I found you. The cat, who had already taken the first step onto the sidewalk, darted back into the bushes. Cindy sighed heavily. Kevin, you couldn't have picked a worse time to come here. I've been over every moment. Called you, guarded you in the driveway. I'm sorry, Cindy said. It's personal to a stranger. Of course, I understand, nodded. The man looked at Kevin and headed for a car parked nearby. Kevin gave him a disgruntled look. Who was that? A random person who was driving by and stopped to help him not to help him. Help with what? Never mind, Cindy sighed. What did you want to talk about? Well, talk then. I'm listening. Kevin sighed too, looked at his feet, then up at the sky. I'm sorry, he muttered. For what? For the thing with the little one. You know, the one that someone saw me with at the coffee shop. I didn't have anything with her, honestly. We just had lunch once. Who is she? Just a girl from work. A nuisance, Kevin said. She's a paper pusher. She's new from out of town, doesn't know anything about this place. But I volunteered to show her where to eat, what stores are nearby. And I had to cuddle. Cindy asked. Well, it was an accident. Cindy, it's just a friendly hug, like at school. Peacefully said Kevin. Haven't you ever hugged your friends? A goodbye hug. Cindy never hugged. Because she didn't even have any friends. Kevin's explanation seemed to make sense, and the whole situation seemed harmless. And yet something didn't feel right to the girl. Forgotten? Kevin asked. His eyes looked so pleading and pitiful again, that look of a hurt puppy, like the first time they met. Cindy couldn't take it anymore. All right, she said. But promise me that if you really do love someone, you'll tell me to my face, and you won't go behind my back to see that girl. Okay, I'll love someone. Are you kidding me? I only love you. Cindy took another look at the bushes. There was no chance of finding the missing cat. From all of Kevin's complaining and wailing, he must have run away. What was the spirit? The stranger's gift of a dinner suit never came in handy. Cindy left it beneath the bushes from the stagger. Further engrossed in conversation with Kevin, cheered by the fact that he had been forgiven. The girl gave herself her word to look for the cat the next day, but she could not fulfill that promise. By evening, she had a sudden cold. The ice-cold cocktail, which Kevin treated her with in honor of reconciliation. And when Cindy recovered and came to the place, she found no one there. She forgot about the cat story for many years, remembering her relationship with Kevin. Later, Cindy couldn't figure out where he was lying and where he was telling the truth. Guy was often fired from his job, but every time he had an explanation for why it happened. And Kevin found a new place pretty quickly. True, these places were not serious. All professions, as a schoolboy helped Kate, then a waiter, then a pizza delivery man. He's got any ambition at all. 25 years old, it'll all work out. Like Cindy's mantra, we'll get through this. Kevin didn't seem to be cheating on her or hiding it well. In her 3rd year, Cindy married him, although the initiative did not come from him, but rather from Kate and Kevin's mother. If the intention is serious, let him marry, Kate said. If not, we don't keep him. Kevin's mother, Adriana, a stern woman who worked as a storekeeper, had expressed herself in much the same way. Later, Cindy wondered if the woman had a personal interest. It was quite possible that Kevin had simply bored her with his antics, and Adriana wanted to dump her son on someone else's shoulders, to hand him over to her daughter-in-law, so to speak, as a transition banner to take a vacation, and no longer take care of him. Cindy was young and naive, didn't realize any of this at the time. Molly, who had volunteered to be a witness at the wedding, sat next to Cindy and Observer Hall with a critical eye. When I have a wedding, I'm not having it in this diner, she said. Some era canteen. Who picked this place? Did you? Adriana, whispered Cindy, watching Kevin's mother fuss over her baby. I thought so for some reason. Molly grinned. She's a golden woman. By the way, what exactly is she sick with? She looks pretty healthy. Look how Adriana was running around, and she did look pretty fit. Despite the fact that Kevin often referred to her health when he was late, Cindy was too shy to ask about it. Such questions seemed indecent to the girl. Why did you come alone? Cindy asked, wanting to change the conversation to another topic. Where is Jacob? We broke up with him. Molly answered briefly, stirred and strawed her cocktail, which made me realize he wasn't my type. No ambition in life. Said he was content to work as a store clerk. Living in Molly's rented apartment, but he's only 26. I tried to talk some sense into my friend Cindy. He's got time for everything. I don't want to wait, Molly replied. You can consider me a terrible woman, but I want everything and immediately want to come to everything ready, so to speak. This principle guided her in the following years, changing fiancés like gloves, all choosing the one. While Cindy was tormenting Kevin, trying to set him straight, Molly lived in her own pleasure, working as a secretary at a large enterprise. Not getting too much, but weekends spent fun, going out at the expense of the next beau out of town or in some restaurant. However, her personal life did not add up, and Molly was slowly falling into a depression. Do you even have a Kevin? She said to Cindy during one of their rare meetings. I don't. Cindy looked at her friend carefully. She was young, radiant, but unhappy, as if all the joys of life had long since bored her. She had been left behind. It looks like I'm going to live a lonely old age with a bunch of cats and a social worker once a week, Molly sighed. What social worker? You're only 25 and you're already past your prime. You're just counting your sores and envying the young college girls who twirl their tails left and right. Molly, can I ask you a question? Cindy asked. No offense, please. It looks like it's going to be a scary question. Molly said. Well, go ahead. Have you ever loved anyone? Any of the guys you dated? Or were they just for fun? Molly thought deeply. She counted something on her fingers, opened her mouth to say something, closed it, and shook her head. I didn't, Cindy asked incredulously. Don't rash anyone at all. Salt on my wound. Molly snapped at her. I told you I didn't. And that's all the more reason to cry and order something hot. She called the waiter over and ordered, then looked at Cindy and asked, "You mean you love your Kevin?" "Of course I do," Cindy answered without hesitation. Almost offended by such a question, Molly looked surprised and honest. "Then there is something to love him for. And why not? He's good, he's kind." Cindy did not find what to praise her husband for and asked, "Does he always love for something?" "I think so. I don't know, of course. Maybe your husband's so perfect that you can love him for nothing." "You're just moping," Cindy remarked. "You see the world in black. You know we're celebrating Kevin's birthday this Sunday. We're going to be at his mother's cottage. If you want to come over, we'll go out for a bit." Molly gave her a long look and smiled. "I will. You'll regret your invitation. Just so you know, I'll drink the most. I'll be dancing on the tables and it won't work." Cindy laughed. "That cottage is more years old than both of us put together. They're barely standing anyway. They'll fall over from all the plates." "Not like you're dancing." "You mean I'm heavy?" The friends chatted for a while and then drifted apart. Cindy didn't know that Molly's words of regret would be prophetic. Not in the sense that her friend would cause a riot at the party. Molly arrived, presented the birthday boy with an expensive watch in a beautiful box. And all evening Molly counted with him. Later, Cindy thought that it must have been at Kevin's birthday party that her husband and friend noticed each other for real, because they had known each other before, but ever so slightly, not paying much attention to each other. Now, being in a melancholy mood, Molly lowered her bar and instead of some oligarch, started hunting Kevin. And he didn't need much. The smile of a random beauty was enough to turn his head. "Your friend better," those words kept echoing in Cindy's ears as she ran from the house where she caught Molly and her husband kissing. Better she knew it. But was it more honest? Cindy regretted for the first time that she didn't know how to swear with feeling, sending all kinds of curses at Molly's head, because her friend was a real bitch. Cindy had nowhere to go but to her mother's house, where she, after a long wandering around the city, and arrived in advance imagining that she would hear something like "I told you all. Men are assholes." However, the mother said the opposite, that they had jumped Kevin. Cindy cried and threw herself into the arms of Katerina Andreevna. The latter stroked her back and muttered, "Don't cry, don't. He is not worth it. They are traitors. I believed them both." "Who? Kevin and Molly?" "I caught them together." You see, Kate's hand stroked her daughter's. Paused for a moment, then hugged Cindy tighter. "It's all right, daughter. It turns out they're punishing themselves." "What do you mean?" "That Kevin is the biggest asshole you've ever seen. And Molly's just like him. Do you think they'll live happily ever after?" Living together isn't about the holidays and fun that these two are used to. It's a lot of work, and it won't last long. From what I remember from your story, neither of them are used to working. "Mom, what about me?" Cindy asked. "What about you? I'll be better off without Kevin than I was before. You'll see, you just have to get used to it." That was easier said than done. That night, Cindy couldn't sleep for a long time, lying there with the phone in her hand, waiting. When would her husband call? Or Kevin was no longer worth calling by that word. It didn't matter. Cindy just wanted to hear his explanation, not an apology. Her intuition told her that Kevin wouldn't stoop to that maybe her husband would admit he'd made a mistake. I mean, anything can go wrong in life, and Kevin seemed to do it every step of the way. She didn't get a call from her husband, so she plucked up the courage to call him herself, barely waited until Kate left for work, and immediately dialed the number. Kevin answered not right away. Cindy thought he wouldn't pick up when he did mumble. "Hello," he sounded sleepy and disgruntled. Cindy glanced at the clock at 9 o'clock. No wonder Kevin was still asleep. Being out of work, he usually lay in bed until lunchtime. "Did I wake you?" Cindy asked. Without waiting for an answer, she continued, "I'm sorry, I just thought we should talk about yesterday." Kevin was silent for a moment and mumbled, "Ah, it's you. Who did you expect to hear from?" Cindy asked. "Didn't Molly spend the night at your place?" She almost said we, but corrected herself in time. How could it be us when she could hardly imagine walking into that apartment and sitting on the couch where Kevin was making out with her friend? I wondered if they'd even cleaned up the groceries off the floor, the same ones Cindy had left in the hallway. The thought was rather untimely, but for some reason it interested the girl. Perhaps it was the habit of saving money. It was a shame that the effort and money had been wasted, but it was a greater shame if Molly had eaten it all. So I'd rather let the shopping go moldy. Whatever, Molly's going to get her stuff, Kevin replied. For her stuff means she's going to get her stuff. Cindy couldn't finish the sentence. Yes, she's moving in here. You left anyway. Cindy didn't understand. Did she hear relief in her husband's voice or not? Maybe he planned this whole thing a long time ago. Maybe Kevin just wishes she would disappear from his life. Why did you do that to me? Cindy asked. You could have honestly said what? That you're the most boring girl I've ever met in my life? Asked Kevin. That would be rude. Well, you know, it wasn't even rude what you ended up doing, Cindy said and hung up. Her heart was pounding like crazy. For the first time in her life, she felt angry at her husband, or should I have said ex-husband. The next week, they filed for divorce. They'd acted without collusion. There was no disagreement about it. Cindy's weekends became empty and boring. Isn't it true that Kevin had been fun the last few years? He'd spent more and more time on the computer, playing with drawn monsters. But now Cindy was left alone with Kate and her crude consolations about how men were a pain in the ass. Didn't help much. The girl had listened to them, and as a child, Cindy began to visit the animal shelter again to occupy her time. Nancy, seeing her for the first time after a long absence, was very pleased. What people? She smiled. I had almost forgotten what you looked like. However, when she saw that Cindy was in no mood for fun, she got serious. Something's happened. I remember the last time you came to see us, you were in trouble in your personal life. I'm afraid to ask if it's happening again. Cindy nodded. It's pretty much the same as last time, she said. The only difference was that last time Kevin had just hugged some girl on the street. And now he's gone a lot further in expressing his feelings, if you know what I mean. Nancy frowned indignantly. What a bastard. And I caught him with my best friend, Cindy added. Molly's betrayal hurt her even more than her husband's infidelity. Cindy naively thought their friendship was something that would last a lifetime. As they say, ice and fire came together, but it turned out that she was for her friend something like a maid of honor, a girl against which to emphasize her beauty, and which is suitable to use her as a vest in those rare cases when you need to cry. Well, if you want to forget about your grief, I think you've come to the right place, Nancy said, because we're surrounded by a lot of animals here who have had it even worse than you have. There's a donut, for example. Let's get to know him. His owner died and the relatives only wanted an apartment, as is usually the case. As a result, the donut ended up on the street in 20-degree cold and is still struggling with the consequences of that cold. And here we have Kelly. Cindy has been following Nancy around, petting the cats and really forgetting about her troubles. On weekdays, she was distracted by work on weekends by the shelter. And still Cindy, who hadn't been able to work out how she felt about her ex-husband, frequently visited Kevin's social networking page, followed his life like some kind of detective story. What are you watching? Nancy asked once again when she caught the girl with her phone. Some kind of show. She looked curiously over the shoulder of her partner. Cindy tried to close the page, but did not manage to do so. Pictures of Kevin cradling him languidly. A smiling Molly remained on the screen. Yes, she muttered embarrassedly. A series about an ex-husband's life. I'm doing something stupid. Yeah, Nancy shrugged. I don't even know, looking at it, why you'd want to do that. And that's what I don't know. Cindy sighed. I guess I just want to know how he's doing, what he's doing. But why? Wouldn't it be better to put him out of my mind? I know in my head it would be better, but I can't help it. I don't think it's right, Nancy said. I would if I were you. What am I saying? It's easier to advise than to live it yourself. In short, I'd take care of myself and show that bastard. What girl did he lose? I don't know anything for Kevin, Cindy said bitterly. Look at my ex-girlfriend. That picture, how can I compete with her? That one. Nancy threw Molly a dismissive glance. Either you and your ex are blind, or I don't know what else to say. It's just a regular broadside scuffle. Some cheap girl with a ton of makeup on her face. You say you're the same age as her, but you can't tell from the picture. I think she's about 10 years older than the life she's lived. You can't tell. That's another question. Which one of us she used more, Cindy said. Molly always seemed perfect for her. It was impossible to get rid of that belief so easily. Nancy took the phone from her hands and started to look at what Kevin had written when he whistled the corner. He had found a new job after all, looking at a company that made parts for machine tools. Wow, I wonder what he does there. Probably drives letters to the post office no other way. Cindy looked at the entry without much interest, underneath which was another picture of her ex-husband. The picture showed Kevin posing against the backdrop of a large, gleaming building. The caption under the photo read, "Moving on to a new horizon." This post was already about a month old, and Cindy had managed to lose interest in it. How trivial is that, Nancy? Then looked at Cindy with sparkling eyes and said you should work there too. This statement almost made Cindy fall off her chair. Why should I? She asked. Why? And more importantly, by whom? It doesn't matter. You have a lot of experience. You're a serious person, not like your rogue mind, Zhenka. You'll do well. And then, how much do you get now, if it's no secret? Blushing enough, Cindy said. Nancy looked her over with a critical eye. Yes, and you don't look it. By the way, you're the one who made me wear that cat house t-shirt. Said we should be a team. But that's not the point. You're supposed to be growing up, moving on, not sitting in one place your whole life working as a file clerk and God. How did I forget that? Forget what? Nancy looked at her with a strange, stunned look and said, I have an acquaintance at this company, a very old acquaintance. I don't even know if he remembers me. We used to talk to this man, and now he's an occasional. He donates money to our shelter. And that Cindy couldn't figure out where her friend was going with this. I know someone there too. Kevin got a job there. What's in it for us? Your ex-husband doesn't give us anything. He just takes from us. But my boyfriend does. It's settled. I'll ask him to hire you. Nancy, don't go crazy, Cindy asked. I'm fine as I am. You are? I think you're just afraid of change. Cindy bought up her tongue. Her friend was 100% right. She was so used to her job. A file clerk used to her little office, the girls in accounting and HR, that she felt like it had always been that way. Going elsewhere meant losing the sturdy, reliable Kogan. Cindy didn't know what might await her in the new place. It was like throwing herself off the side of a ship into the open sea. It's a stupid gamble, Cindy said. Changing my job because of Kevin was already changing my whole life. I don't want to quit a secure job and go somewhere else. Or maybe if we change, we should do it all at once. Nancy asked. And then, if this place seems unreliable to you, I don't know what to suggest. She opened again the picture of the company where Kevin worked. Nancy was right. Many of Cindy's acquaintances spoke of it fondly as something unattainable. It paid very good wages, some of the best in the city. But it was almost impossible to get in, unless by acquaintance or some small position like the one Kevin had probably taken, something more than a courier or a cleaner. A random person off the street wasn't going to make it. Cindy voiced these thoughts to her friend, but she dismissed them. I'm telling you, I have an acquaintance. And then it's a matter of technique. I'm going to call him right now. Watching Nancy search her phone for the number, Cindy winced with excitement and whispered, maybe you shouldn't. Nancy didn't listen to her, made a sign to be quiet, and started into the phone. Michael, hello. It's convenient for you to speak now. This is Nancy, yes, from the animal shelter. Remember me? Cindy could barely keep her hands from covering her face in her imagination. Some respectable elderly man in a suit at that moment was scratching the back of his head in bewilderment and trying to remember who Nancy was and what shelter she was talking about. Surely this man must have forgotten all about his charity. He probably set his cards to autopay, sending a certain amount every month. And then the volunteers show up, calling him like they're his best friends. Apparently, Michael remembered Nancy because the girl said in the same enthusiastic tone, I have a favor to ask of you. Could you hire a friend of mine? Do you have a place for her? Nancy, stop it, moaned Cindy. She could hardly keep herself from snatching the receiver from her friend and dropping the call. The girl felt very embarrassed, as if she herself had been calling an important boss and asking for his job. All by way of defense, thought the friend, clasped the phone with the palm of her hand and read again, addressing the unknown Michael. She had worked as an education clerk for several years. What is your education? Economics and management at the enterprise. A red diploma, Cindy said shyly. Wow, Nancy gasped, and then she came to her senses. I mean, not you, Michael. She has a red diploma in business economics. Got it? Okay. Cindy listened with bated breath to her friend's one-word answers and tried to figure out what was going on. Nancy's face remained enthusiastic, and Cindy didn't know whether it pleased her or frightened her. Well, she asked when her friend had finished her conversation. What did he say? That he would be expecting you the day after tomorrow for the interview. V9 o'clock, room 204. The building is the shiny cube in the picture your husband was smiling at us from. Now it's up to you, Mommy mumbled. Cindy, what am I gonna do? I haven't been to a job interview in 100 years. I've forgotten what it's like not to be in front of one. Michael is kind. He won't hurt you. Michael questioned Cindy in surprise. Nancy winked at her. You'll see for yourself. I've got to get on with the cats. We've got litter box cleaning on the agenda right now. You're in. Cindy was nervous about going to the interview because she had to lie to her colleagues. She said she had a dentist appointment, instead of confessing everything because she didn't know what she was going to talk about in the interview. Because of the very meeting with the boss during the phone call, Nancy behaved a little too proprietorially with him, and Cindy was ashamed of it. I'm sure this unknown Michael must have thought Cindy was a cheeky girl. She'd taken a job on a whim, even though her connections weren't that good. A shelter volunteer and a supervisor working for a big company. What did they have in common? Cindy was dressed especially carefully for the interview. She pulled out of her closet her best suit, which she usually only wore on meeting days. She felt she had to look especially festive for those. For about 20 minutes, she paced in front of the mirror, wondering if she should take Nancy's advice and wear a little brighter makeup than usual, or leave everything as it is. In the end, she decided she wasn't going to a beauty contest and used one eye pencil. She called a cab because she was afraid she'd be late. As she approached the office, Cindy felt like a schoolgirl, her knees shaking the way they used to before exams. Everything she was going to say about herself had slipped her mind. There was no receptionist in front of the office, and Cindy cheered up a little. So the position held by the unknown Michael in this company was not prohibitively high. After reading his name on the plaque, the girl knocked and stepped inside. You can. The man behind the desk looked up, and Cindy was embarrassed. She didn't know why she had thought the boss would be an old man. The man turned out to be young, barely over 30, and very handsome. Not the left-handed beauty that Kevin was characterized by, but a real masculine beauty. Cindy felt the same insecurity she sometimes felt in front of her classmates. Managing herself, she said, "Hello, Michael. I'm Cindy. You scheduled an interview for me today." For a moment, she thought that the boss was speechless at the sight of her, but that moment passed quickly. Why would he be amazed? Most likely Cindy had imagined the whole thing. "Good afternoon," he nodded. "Come and sit down." Cindy sank down on the edge of the chair and folded her hands in her lap. Then she came to her senses and put them on the table this way and that. She resembled a schoolgirl. It seemed to be the girl's eternal curse. "Tell us a little about yourself. Why do you want to work for us?" Michael asked. He nervously moved papers from one place to another, and then began to twirl a pen in his hands. The man was definitely worried, although Cindy couldn't understand why. However, at this moment, the girl did not care about other people's worries. All the speeches she had prepared in advance had slipped Cindy's mind. What could she say to that question? To say that she wanted to prove something to her ex-husband, or that she was going to spy on him? Neither of these answers obviously did not fit the image of a solid economist. The girl hesitated. Courage. Michael encouraged her. "I'm not touching." Cindy looked at him and was surprised to realize that the man was smiling. The girl relaxed a little. You never be honest. I guess I just wanted to change my life with unexpected honesty, she said. But of course, I am ready to work and benefit the company. I still have some knowledge of economics. But for the last few years, you have been working as a clerk, Michael clarified. Cindy nodded. She thought again about coming here for nothing. An economist with no experience. Who would hire her? Thank you for your candor, said the boss. That's a pretty important quality too. And rare these days, I must say. I have a vacancy in the sales department paid internship. Probationary period of 3 months. But how? Are you ready to give it a try? Cindy nodded again, this time more animatedly. Not believing her luck, ready, she assured the man. I won't let you down. You'll see. Pleased to see such an attitude with a smile, the man replied. Later, telling Nancy about the encounter, Cindy could not contain her surprise. I thought it would be very scary, but it turned out to be the opposite, she said. And then Michael turned out to be a very nice man. He asked me a little about my previous experience, what I expected from the new position, and then joked that I was the only thing missing in his department. Why the joke? Nancy asked. Maybe he was being completely sincere. Come on, Nancy, what does he need me for? I'm surprised they hired me in this place. I didn't even work as an economist, I just corresponded. And this is a lot of responsibility. Cindy is so boring. It's all about professional qualities. Maybe Michael was looking for someone like you. Cindy only waved her away. The girl was worried about more important problems, such as how to inform her former place that she was going to quit, especially to tell Sophia, with whom Cindy had established a rather warm relationship. To her surprise, the personnel officers took the news of the girl's dismissal almost with joy. Well done, Cindy. Sophia smiled. Way to go. To be honest, I was afraid that you would stay here forever. You'll sit here till you're old, like Zubova from accounting. Do I bore you so much? Embarrassed, Cindy? Not at all. You used to be interesting to talk to at lunch, even though we dined together. We don't dine together very often. It's just that I think you deserve something more than a day's worth of paperwork and a big paycheck. Sophia, I have enough money, but I don't need it. Right? In short, I wish you good luck in your new position. But I'm going to have a problem now. I have to find a new student who's willing to work for that little bit of money. Although I'll tell you a secret, I'm thinking of leaving here myself. The place will be empty without you, Sophia. It already is, Cindy. From the moment you decided to leave, the first month in the new place was a blur. There was so much to memorize and learn that Cindy hardly noticed what day was on the calendar. The girls' coworkers were about her age or just over 30, and Cindy easily found a common language with them. The boss also gave the impression of a pleasant person, even more than pleasant. The sales department, in which Cindy found herself, turned out to be one close-knit team, almost a family. But the girl did not immediately get used to it. When one of Kathy's employees called her boss Mike, Cindy was amazed. Michael hesitantly, she asked. You mean Michael? Who else? Her interlocutor was surprised. Drop his patronymic. They only call him Michael at important meetings. We're Michael. I called him by his first name. Don't address him like that, though he probably won't take offense. He'll just laugh. I'm telling you, he's his own guy, the boss, and really behaved with them as equals, and did not raise his voice. If he pointed out a mistake to someone, he did it in a stern but calm tone. Little by little, having freed herself, Cindy stopped tensing up when she met him and felt some inexplicable trust in Michael. The main thing, perhaps, was that it was not her looks that mattered to him, but her business qualities. Cindy was surprised to realize that she still had her university knowledge in her head and that she was doing her job quite well. How are you still alive here? Michael asked sympathetically when Cindy looked up from her paperwork and looked down at the report. I can manage, but it has been more difficult, she admitted. For example, when at my previous place of work, I was asked to help with the vacation schedule for the department, and everyone argued with each other. I could not reconcile them. Are you implying that your former colleagues were worse than the partners, who calculate every letter in the contract and pick on all the points? Michael grinned. Well, as long as you can still make jokes, it's okay. You know, Cindy, there's something I'd like to discuss with you, but it's getting close to lunchtime. That's okay. I'm in no hurry anyway, the girl assured him. How would you like to discuss it over a cup of coffee? There's a pretty good cafe on the corner here. Okay, I don't mind a little tomato, nodded Cindy. The girl wondered to herself how she managed to keep her outward composure. The panic of going to a cafe with a man rose in her soul. She hadn't gone out with anyone in years. To be more precise, she hadn't gone to a cafe with any man except Kevin. And that was way back in college when they first met. What do you think you're trying to talk yourself into, Cindy? It's not a man. It's not a boyfriend. It's just Michael. The warden's probably going to talk to me about some problem. And I've been making up all sorts of things. And yet, following Michael down the corridor, the girl could not get rid of her nervous trembling. Silly thoughts popped into her head, like whether she was ragged, whether she had hair, whether her mascara was smeared. Though what did it matter if they were going to have a work-related conversation in the cafe? Cindy was in for shock number 2. She'd worked at the company for a month, but had never met her ex-husband, had almost resigned herself to it, and had stopped thinking about Kevin. It wasn't a big deal. Work was on her mind. And then suddenly, Cindy saw him standing by the cash register with a cardboard cup in his hand. Probably ran in here for a coffee. Not sooner, not later, the girl thought heartily. He was the only thing missing here. Still, she couldn't help her curiosity. Cindy wanted to know if her husband had changed since the divorce, and if so, for better or worse. At first glance, there was no noticeable change in the man, or perhaps his face looked thinner than usual, and the shirt wasn't the main one for sure. There's a crease in the back. Molly never bothers to do housework. Now Kevin would have to put up with it. The ex-husband finally noticed Cindy. There was genuine shock on his face, and Cindy looked away, feeling her face light up. "What is it?" Michael asked. "Are you not well?" "No, just ignore it. It's all right." Cindy had deliberately chosen the far table in the corner as far away from the entrance as possible and still felt the eyes on her. Kevin. The man had forgotten about his coffee and was hurrying towards her. God, what did he need? Michael placed the order. Cindy didn't even realize what they were going to eat. Answered the supervisor's questions, machine like a robot. Michael lowered his voice, said, "Pardon my insistence. Maybe it's none of my business. That man at the entrance with the glass in his hand, he's unpleasant to you. What makes you think that, Cindy? It's all over your face. If he's a bad acquaintance of yours and you don't feel comfortable here, just say so. I'll cancel the reservation and we'll go somewhere else." "That's a lot of honor for him," Cindy muttered and sighed. "Yes, to tell the truth, he's an acquaintance of mine, an ex-husband to be more precise. And to find him here was a great surprise to me. Judging by your appearance, you separated recently and not in a friendly way," Michael remarked. Cindy forced herself to smile. "Did you take a psychology course?" "No, I just saw the look on my ex-wife's face. When we accidentally met on the street, it was just like your husband's, wasn't it? It's unmistakable. Are you divorced too?" "Yes, I've been divorced for a year now. Why are you so surprised? I just didn't expect you." Cindy did not finish the sentence. She had known the boss for a little over a month, but she saw how colleagues and subordinates treated him very kindly and with respect. Michael never shouted at anyone. He was very nice to everyone. And with his dark squares and slightly snub-nosed profile, he looked very handsome. What woman in her right mind would leave a husband like that? Unless he wanted to leave. "I found out my wife was cheating on me with my best friend," Michael said. "It's a pretty unpleasant story. I don't discuss it with anyone and I want to forget it as soon as possible. My ex probably looks at me like that when I see her too. Even though it's been a year, and I have the same story as you," Cindy admitted. "Husband and girlfriend since college, but I can't get over it yet. It's only recently." Kevin continued to look in her direction. Cindy sighed. Why does he keep looking at her? It's annoying. A mischievous smile suddenly appeared on Michael's face. "Do you mind if we tease your husband a little?" he asked. "What do you mean?" Michael took her hand instead of answering. Cindy wanted to pull away, but something stopped her. Probably the amused expression in Michael's eyes, too. He was acting like a boy. Can you imagine what it would be like for your husband to see that you didn't care enough about him? Showing up at the cafe with someone else? He asked. No. Then count the seconds. Let's see how many seconds it takes for him to disappear from here or come to me to confront me. Though I highly doubt the traitor will have the guts to do that. Cindy smiled involuntarily at him without playing along. It came out of its own accord. Then she glanced furtively at the cash register. Kevin frowned and mumbled something to the waitress and headed straight for the door. A second later, the bell jingled. At once it was easier to breathe. He's gone, Cindy said and released his hand. How fast? Michael muttered, as it seemed to the girl with disapproval. Don't tell me you wanted to sit holding hands with me forever, Cindy smiled. A waitress approached and saved her boss from having to answer. While the girl left the plates on the table, Michael was thinking about something. And when the waitress finally left, he said, "That guy looks familiar to me." What guy? Cindy asked. Your husband? I've seen him somewhere before. No wonder. He works at the same company as us. I don't know really, what does he do? Nancy assumes he's a courier, but there's no way of knowing for sure. Well, of course, Michael slapped his forehead. I saw him in the clerk's office for sure. He was carrying some envelopes at the time. Wait a minute. So you knew your ex-husband worked here and decided to apply for a job here. Why? Cindy didn't know what to say to that question. Her own ventures now, after all this time, seemed idiotic to her. Honestly, I don't know, she admitted. At the time I thought, when I joined you, that it would be interesting to follow Kevin's life, to see what changed in it when I left. And now I don't know why it was necessary. It was childish, like I seriously expected him to cry and tear his hair out without me. Yeah, he's with Molly, and they'd probably have the best life. Michael didn't say anything for a long time, and the girl even felt that he was offended about something, wanting to turn the conversation to something else. Cindy asked, "Did you want to tell me something important?" Michael asked. He seemed to be thinking somewhere far away from here. I mean about the job. Oh yes, the job. Michael remembered his duties and became confident and calm again. I'm going on a business trip to New York in 2 weeks, and I'd like you to come with me to negotiate with those big shots. I can't believe my ears, Cindy asked. A bit loud for a firm that almost declared bankruptcy a year ago. But with them, Michael, don't. But here you are calling me by my middle name again, Cindy. Don't. This time the smile of the boss did not work on the girl. She was just terrified of the prospect of going to some kind of negotiations and hit in the mud in front of. Well, not in front of the world, but in front of her own department. Michael, I'm serious. Why me? I have almost no experience. I'll blow your case. You'll see, take Kathy or James. They'll do a much better job. Kathy will be on vacation this time. She's been planning her trip almost a year in advance. We'll let her rest. And James, let's just say his fighting skills aren't really needed this time. I can handle myself, but I could really use an outside perspective. You can think of it as a secretarial assignment if you like. You will? Keep an eye on the paperwork, keep an eye on things, take notes, that sort of thing. Cindy's a little relieved. She could really handle it all. All right, I'll go with you, she said. Really, it's all so sudden. And in life, my dear Cindy. Everything happens unexpectedly, her boss replied. When, unfortunately, and when fortunately. One thing at a time. That same evening, Cindy could not resist telling Nancy what had happened over the phone without seeing her friend. But from her voice, she could imagine how delighted she was. She was. He was holding your hand. Wow, Nancy, that's all you care about. I met Kevin. What's the big deal? Kevin is so last century. It's long past time to let it go and call it a day. You two broke up. Enough. If Kevin is the past, then Michael is the future. Cindy asked skeptically. That's up to you. Depends on how you behave. You got it, Nancy. He was just playing along. And you played along. See if it works out. Nancy, you can't be serious. A man like Michael wouldn't look at me for the life of him. Well, according to your story, not only did he look at me, but he asked me to the restaurant and even held my hand. Cindy was silent. She still could not realize what had happened. On the one hand, it seemed that the boss was really playing with her. On the other, when she remembered the look in his eyes, it all seemed remarkably serious. As if they really were a couple, as if the warden had something for her. "All right, that's enough," Nancy said. "Tell me, do you only like him as a man?" "Yes, of course, not as a man, but as a potential fiancé." "You're silly, Nancy, that's silly. If you don't say no, the answer is yes. Tomorrow is Saturday, you have the day off. I'll be at your house at 1 o'clock. Wait, Nancy kept her threat and came to her, not alone, but with a whole collection of jars and vials. "We'll fix you up," she declared. "If you and Mike are going to play at being a couple, you have to live up to it." "Nancy, I've told you 100 times, I didn't mean it. It's a joke, and it was a one-time thing. What if it happens again? Kevin's still out there, isn't he? Mike will take your hand, and then Nancy will look at her friend's nails and wrinkle her nose in agony. Cindy wears the manicure? I've never gotten one. Just nails underneath and that's it. I'm gonna take you seriously. I'm gonna make you look beautiful. You'll see," Nancy promised. "You're pretty as you are, but soon Kevin will just fall over the next time he sees you." It was impossible to change Nancy's mind when things got into her head. Cindy had to suck it up and sit down at the table. "Let's start with the nails," Nancy said. "Then eyebrows. Well, I'm no expert, but it'll definitely be better than it was. I'll have to think about the hair. I'll take you to my friend. She's a hairdresser. Lena's sure to find the best one for you." Cindy has always hated these girlish entertainments with all kinds of makeup and experiments with appearance. So the weekend when Nancy took her seriously, as she put it, was one of the most tedious of her life, but the result was worth it. Sunday evening, looking at her reflection in the mirror, Cindy wondered if she was her own person or if she had been replaced. Cindy parted with her braid and got a knotty one with a braid. But she couldn't help admitting that she was happy with her new hairstyle, and her face was transformed. It was like a glow of hope. Cindy felt strong and renewed and was not afraid of anything. Even her ex-husband, who she had met on Monday morning on her way to work. At first he looked at her from the side for a long time, probably a good half a minute, trying to realize whether it was Cindy or a trick of the eye. And when the girl stepped resolutely onto the porch, he grabbed her arm. "Cindy, wait, we need to talk." "What's this about?" The girl didn't understand and let me go. "I'm hurting Molly her so grabbed, not me, but mine." "Molly?" asked Kevin. "She's been grieving for a long time and has nothing to say." "What are you talking about?" Cindy was indignant. "That you immediately confused with some man. That's what. Who is he? What do you care? Do you have a thing for him?" Kevin kept up. "Do you think he grabbed your hands?" Her ex-husband said, as if he was accusing Cindy of some crime. "If I'm not mistaken, you grabbed Molly too, and not just by the hands." Coldly, Cindy replied, "So don't stand in my way. Let me through." Her ex-husband suddenly seemed unassuming and pathetic to the girl. How could she love this man? And what did she find in him all those years ago? Kevin looked at her face with a confused look at her hair and was not going to let go. I was too dumbfounded by what was happening. Michael came to the rescue as he pulled up to Cindy's building. "What's going on here?" he asked, coming closer. If the boss was surprised by Cindy's new look, he hid it better than Kevin. His face only flashed with a strange emotion that the girl could not capture, and then it was gone. Cindy even felt disappointed. "Didn't he like it?" Kevin shook her hand and released it. Cindy lost her wrist. "Don't come near me again," she said. "It's over between us. Won't come near me," promised Michael. Kevin gave her a disgruntled look, and taking the girl's hand, Kevin did not object, stood still and with a helpless look, watched them walk away. As the pair rounded the corner, Cindy whispered, "He can't see anymore." "We may or may not be allowed to leave?" Michael asked, and without waiting for an answer, he added that you look very nice in your new hairstyle. "Thank you," blushing, Cindy said. They walked all the way to the sales office holding hands. Only where they could be seen by their coworkers, rasped their fingers, and went in different directions. Cindy to her seat, to listen to Kathy rave about her new look, and Michael to his office to prepare for another meeting. The next few days went quite normally. Cindy even began to think that this was the end of it. She never saw Kevin again. Michael made no indication that anything special had happened between them. It was all for nothing, she told Nancy. You know, I almost wish Kevin was bothering me more. I think Michael's a really good actor. At least he was very believable when he pretended to my ex-husband that he felt something for me, even I believed it. Why do you think he did? My friend asked. Maybe he really does. Nancy, that's ridiculous. I don't believe in love at first sight. At least at our age, then I impressed Mike by being good at parsing documents, and knowing them with bitterness, asked Cindy. I'm really nothing. I'm nothing and I haven't proven myself. Maybe you have, but you don't remember it. Well, yes, I remembered in time that Gennady Evgenievich from the neighboring office has an anniversary, and we should congratulate him. I guess that's when Michael fell in love with me. I love your sarcasm, Field. But it's not appropriate right now. It's not sarcasm. I'm serious. Do you really think it's possible to fall in love with someone? After knowing them for a couple months, Cindy asked, or maybe not a couple months, but a lot longer? Nancy, stop talking in riddles. I've never been good at them, or better yet. Stop talking about Michael. It was a waste of time. It's over. How do you know? Nancy stretched out. But I agree with you about talking about him all the time is too much of an honor. How about we talk about food? I, for one, am terribly hungry. Let's feed our mustachioed angels. And the cafeteria is my treat. The cat shelter continued to play a big part in Cindy's life. Her life was still not very exciting. And the girl regularly came to help every Saturday, not doomed by her own home. Cindy thought that she was just doing good deeds and did not expect anything in return. However, as it turned out later, the cats did repay her for her kindness, and in a way that the girl did not expect. The truth was revealed quite by accident a few days before the appointed business trip, which Cindy again feared like fire. She had no idea how to communicate with Michael. She couldn't even look at him calmly. And here they had to fly 2 hours in an airplane, then live in the same hotel for 12 hours a day together. Cindy thought about it so much that she didn't even look around. She was just coming back from work, having experienced another boring, unremarkable day. The puddle from which she was rolled by the passing car was also unremarkable. But when, at the girl's cries, water splashed into her face and pants, it sobered Cindy a little. Now she muttered sadly, wiping her face with a handkerchief and examining the soiled clothes, the field. It in the car, I'll give you a ride. The girl raised her head and saw a car stopped nearby. She would recognize this car from a 1000. Every day she waited with some trepidation to see if she would meet its owner at the porch. Michael rolled down his window and looked anxiously at Cindy. She hesitated for a few moments and nodded. Thank you. If you don't mind. Cindy sat in the front seat and folded her hands in her lap. It was as hard to look at them as it was for Michael to remember the way he'd squeezed her fingers. What should Cindy do? Is there something special about this? She's an idiot who made it up herself, and she's blaming it on the man. It's not Michael's fault she has such a wild imagination. Where can I take you home? Michael asked. Cindy nodded. Then, deciding that it was impolite to say that, yes, and seeing that the boss had decisively steered the car into the right lane, she asked, how did you know where I lived? I looked in your file, Michael admitted. It's awkward, honestly. It's okay. You're the boss, so it's only natural. I didn't ask about it as a supervisor, mumbled Michael. Stop playing with me, Cindy asked tiredly. My husband isn't around. We're all alone here, there's no need to pretend. Michael stopped the car abruptly at the curb. Cindy grabbed the seat and asked fearfully, What? How many times can you accuse me of being insincere? Listen to you? So I'm some kind of clown, a public playing actor from the Weatherly Theater. But why else would you be looking at my personnel file if not for business reasons? Cindy asked, and she froze, whether she would admit it or not. With her question, she left Michael no choice. Or would he remain her boss? Or was there something stirring in the bushes where they were sitting? Cindy's rotten. Don't scare the dog. It's not like he can jump into our cabin. Michael, it can't jump in anywhere. I think it was hit by a car. I think the warden took offense at being called by his first name again without listening to what he was saying. Cindy walked out into the rain. Michael came out after her lying on the lawn. The mongrel raised its head ugly, glanced at the people approaching it, and lay down again. "I think the paw is broken," Cindy said. "We should take it to Nancy." "No, she's got a cat shelter, and there's no vet right now. What am I going to drive her in? I don't have a car, and neither does Nancy." Michael made a meaningful smack and pointed to his car. "Are you suggesting I drive the dog in your car?" "Your car." Mistrustful, Cindy asked, "Do you see anyone else's here?" "No, but it would be awkward." "It wouldn't be the first time. Probably better to style your jacket. Easier to wash than to clean the seats or throw away." Cindy watched Michael carefully put the dog in the car. She couldn't believe her eyes. "You say it's not the first time. Who have you rescued before? You don't remember anything at all." Again with the riddles, Cindy said in her heart, "You're just like my friend Nancy. You talk in hints and won't explain what's going on." Sick cat. His face is hard to forget, but you will. Nothing comes to mind. Cindy shook her head confusedly. Then she gasped, remembering I wanted to feed a stray cat. And some guy walked by. He gave me a hamburger, and then Kevin showed up and started making a scene. "No, let's not talk about him. So it was you. You approached me on the street." Michael nodded. "But it had been years." Cindy whispered, "Did you really remember me? Not just remembered. You know, was there something about you that stuck with me back then? I don't know. Probably because of their kindness and openness. All the girls I knew back then were just ordinary dolls, obsessed with their looks and my money. You were very different from them in your orphanage clothes. I wanted to get to know you better. Came back later to get this cat and went to the shelter with him. But Nancy said you were married. I didn't know what your relationship was with your husband, so I backed off. Probably shouldn't have. I should have stopped that henchman back then. Things could have turned out a lot better. Neither you nor I would have made any mistakes. I wouldn't have married the first woman I met. Would you have left your scoundrel of a husband sooner?" Cindy looked at him and couldn't find the words. Her mind was a mess. "Where is the cat now?" she asked. Michael almost fell over at her words. "I've confessed my love to you now, and you only care about the cat." He asked, "Really?" Cindy laughed nervously. "Sorry. This is so sudden. I need to think it over. Now let's go to the vet." "Okay," Michael nodded resentfully and went to drive. Cindy sat down next to him and took his hand. "I'm sorry, I just don't know how to act or what to say to you. It turns out you've seen me as a girl in a t-shirt all this time, and you've been Michael to me." She paused and I asked her, embarrassed, "Do you really like me?" Instead of answering, Michael squeezed her palm. Cindy rested her forehead against his shoulder and murmured, "Let's go. We'll talk about everything later. I'm feeling so much right now, I can't put it into words. And then we have to help the dog, right, and add another tenant to my apartment." Michael grinned. "That cat, by the way, his name is Max, still lives with me. If you want, I'll introduce you. I want to get to know you properly too. Well, Nancy knew everything and didn't tell me. It's called a friend. If you knew we'd met before and I was looking for you, would you have agreed to join my department? I guess not. It'd be too awkward." "Well, that's the thing. That's why I didn't tell you anything. She didn't want to scare you off." They spent that night at the vet's office and didn't get a chance to talk. However, they made up for it on business trips, where Cindy went with new fears. She was afraid that, having gotten to know her better, Michael would remain disappointed and would not want to continue the relationship. However, that didn't happen. They returned home with a signed contract in the official status of a couple. And then the girl found out that Kevin no longer works at the company he was fired again. Cindy asked Michael. Like always, that's usually how it ended. As far as I know, he quit of his own accord. Although people I know in the clerk's office say he's out of work now, out of nowhere. Maybe it's because of us, Cindy said. Though it doesn't matter to me, it does to me, said Michael. Now, when I want to kiss you or hold your hand, you won't think I'm playing to the public. I haven't felt that way for a long time, Cindy smiled. And I think I'm grateful to Kevin. In a way, he brought us together. He's a wonderful guy, Michael grinned. I'm even thinking of using him as a witness at the wedding. What do you say? What wedding? Cindy asked in surprise. Michael took the ring for ours out of his pocket. "If you agree to be my wife, of course." Cindy couldn't find the strength to answer. She just nodded and hugged Michael. Tears of happiness ran down her cheeks. Cindy finally felt loved.